Well, I can hear his voice. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Stratosphere Lounge with your host, Bill Whittle. Welcome. It's good to see everybody. Coming to you from the actual command center. This is the captain's chair, and you can see the awesome, badass webbing here behind me. And I'm sitting here looking at my big 4K monitor, trying not to wallow in my own crapulence, as we would say on The Simpsons. Sometimes I look up at this monitor and have the same expression as Dave Bowman has right directly behind me there. It's like, it's pretty cool. So good to have everybody here. This is episode 90, if you can believe it, episode 90 of the Stratosphere Lounge. That's saying something. That's saying it's more than 89 and less than 91. Hope everybody out there is doing well. And we got an aviation-related show tonight, which makes me happy. Always makes me happy to be talking about flying in airplanes and stuff, so we'll be doing that. As usual, we just do a quick little round-the-horn update. We got the, you may remember the Speakeasy show, which we shot a month ago. Astrogirl is not here, by the way. Astrogirl is in Cleveland, freezing in 20-degree weather. Or who am I kidding? She said it was 10 degrees or 2 degrees or something. But we're doing the show pretty much by ourselves here. We have a small in-house studio audience. 200-300 people, nothing too major, just a small crowd of my closest friends. And anyway, so we have a Speakeasy finally after all the other stuff I have to get going. By the way, I just want to interrupt. Joe Baseball said he likes the Stratosphere Lounge best. I do too. I actually think I'm going to be doing the show from now on, because we do have a second camera, by the way, just so you know, so you can see the awesomeness of this fully armed and operational battle station. Hey, everybody out there in wide shot land, we got Captain James Tiberius Kirk behind me, and we have the TV show Enterprise, and we have the movie Enterprise, and then we have not the reboot movie Enterprise, but a version of what the original series Enterprise should have looked like, done by a 3D modeler, and it's badass. And of course we have the Stratosphere Lounge thing. We have the Evil Gorn Captain back there, and I don't know if you can see it from here, but no, it's hidden behind my awesome weight machine. But on the other side of the wall from Gorn Captain, we have Captain Kirk looking at him. He's pouring the sulfur and the charcoal into his bamboo cannon, because that's the Western mindset. When you've got 9-foot-tall reptilian demon hounds who can't be killed with rocks or anything else like that, you got to make your own gun, baby. And if you have to build that gun out of bamboo and vines and make your own gunpowder and use diamonds for bullets, then by God, all right. So anyway, yeah, I forgot what I was talking about. I completely forgot what I was talking about. Oh, Speakeasy. We'll get there eventually. Got everything up and loaded, and we just got the things synced up, so we're going to start doing those episodes. What got me off topic was this view. I think what I actually like this view so much better, and I don't think the show's ever looked better than it does right now, the color balance and stuff. So here's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to do the solo shows from here, because I've had a lot of people say they think it's a little more personal. And then we'll keep the stage for, you know the stage I'm talking about. That would be that stage right over there. Awesome. There, yonder. We can keep that stage for visiting guests. You never know who might show up. Maybe Tom Cruise is in Sherman Oaks and he's got nothing to do. He may be, maybe he's just like wandering down the street or something. It's like, yeah, 5:15. He's probably, thinking, I can get to Burritoville or something, and maybe he's just outside. You never know. Could happen in California, could happen in Hollywood. Anything can happen. But no, we will definitely have some guests back there. So anyway, we got Speakeasy is in the big box, all, I don't know, 30 gigabytes, 60 gigabytes of it, something like that. And we're getting that cut. And for those of you who've been paying attention, we have in fact been cranking out those time over targets once a week now for 4 weeks. I think we're on number 30, so 6 weeks. So that's pretty impressive, and we have our amazing, talented friend Dante, who's doing that work for me and saving me from nervous breakdowns, because he's just knocking them out, and I can worrying about other things. So he's doing a great job, and we're real happy with that. So anyway, so we've been getting the time over target stuff out. We've been getting the Speakeasy stuff ready. There's 9 segments that we shot about a month ago, but we're going to get those things upline, and then we'll be in business. And we can move on to greater things. We have some interesting questions, and I was going to talk about something anyway, but it turns out one of the questions is kind of closely related to that, so I will save it for that. So why don't we just get going here with episode 90 of the Stratosphere Lounge. And the first question, highest ranked question on our aviation show, was from Susan Speakman, who says, I would love to hear your thoughts on Amelia Earhart, her actual skills as a pilot, and her around-the-world trip. Well, anybody who's going to launch into a crossing of the Pacific Ocean with, essentially no navigation other than a compass, hoping to find a little speck in the Pacific, has my respect. I think it's been pretty much widely reported and pretty much true to say that she was not an exceptional pilot. A lot of close calls and a couple of dings and pows and stuff. But you have to really... The thing you have to factor into that is it's not a question of how was Amelia Earhart as a pilot, because, she maybe wasn't a very good pilot, frankly. But that's not what she was doing. What she was doing was she was setting frontiers and boundaries, and she was doing it at a time when women were in the kitchen. I mean, that was it. You could, if you were an unmarried woman, you might be a nurse or a teacher. And to have an aviatrix doing man stuff, and this is not long after Lindbergh's flight, 5-10 years after Lindbergh's flight, to have a woman out there in her cool little riding pants and her cool little bob haircut and doing everything the boys were doing is pretty revolutionary stuff, and it's important. And flying across the Atlantic Ocean is a big deal. Flying across the Pacific Ocean is insane. I'm getting a little comments. The mic is a little bit hot. I'll turn it down maybe a little bit because you never really know. I've got Bose headphones here, but sometimes on other speakers it may be a little tinny, so see if that's any better. Anyway, so you have to figure in what she did. So I think she's a remarkable individual. I think this actually, come to think of it, it's probably just monitor volume. I will take it down just a little bit. And with that said, what happened to her? It was a giant mystery for the longest time, and I think that mystery's pretty much been solved. I wish I'd had the research on it. The nice thing about the hive mind is I can just say something, and in 20 seconds it's going to be it's going to show up in the comments. Just before I go any further, is anybody getting this? A couple people have said I've got a bee in my mouth. Is it still buzzy? Because it sounds great to me. I took the volume down a little bit. I don't know. I'm not showing any signs. Well, maybe it's peaking a little bit. Let's try that. So anyway, there she is out there over the Pacific Ocean with no navigation system, no GPS, needless to say, no moving map display, no VOR, nothing. She's just out there with dead reckoning. A lot of people think dead reckoning comes from dead as in not living, but dead reckoning actually comes from deduced. It's from deduced reckoning. Anyway, she's flying across the largest uninhabited area on Earth, the Pacific Ocean, trying to find a speck, which means that you can miss it to the south, you can miss it to the north, and technically speaking, if the weather's not good, you can miss it east and west. You can come up short, you can go long. It was obviously one of the great mysteries. A little more, we're getting on the mic. I'll take the volume down a little bit. It was one of the great mysteries for the longest time, and now I don't think it is anymore. I think it's pretty much been solved. There's a lot of evidence of wreckage from her plane, and I cannot remember the name of the island. I know I'll get it in 10 seconds. Somebody's going to come up with it. A little atoll in the Pacific. And they found parts of the landing gear strut that was looked like it was off of her plane. They found a little piece of like a perfume bottle that she had, other little fragments on this little island, this little atoll out in the middle of the Pacific. And there's one picture, this is really, really tantalizing. Somebody took a picture, I think it was like a destroyer off the island back in the 40s. And in that one photograph that they took, just a random picture of a random island, they didn't know that she might have survived there. In the 40s, there's a picture, and you can see a little bit of either wing or landing gear or something coming out of the water by the beach, but it's not there anymore. And over time, the tides and the currents and stuff would pull that wreckage out to sea. So, but there is indication that there was an airplane in the water. There's nothing there now, But there are bits of the puzzle, I think including human bones, that make it pretty compelling, almost certain in my mind. It looks like a lot of people said Howland. Somebody said it's Nikamuraru. That doesn't sound right, but it's Lord Teo said the island is called Australia. She missed it. Wow. No, it wasn't Australia. Anyways, a little atoll, and a couple of people come up with something. But anyway, they found the wreckage, and not the wreckage. They found bits of debris that probably belonged to her, and it looks very much like she ran out of fuel, or was about to run out of fuel. Didn't make where she needed to make where their landing strip was. Found this little atoll, probably ditched intentionally. That's what I would do if I was low on fuel. If I knew I wasn't going to get where I was going, I'd want to fly the plane into the water while I still had some power, because as long as I got power, I can finesse the landing. And from where that plane appears to have come to a rest, if it turns out that World War II picture or whatever is accurate, then she did a really good job and got it right next to this island. And then the sad part of this is there's a pretty, again, from the debris that they recovered, some fairly compelling evidence that she actually survived the landing. Somebody survived the landing and made it to the island and basically just starved to death. I mean, there's really not much there. Howland Island sounds right. A little atoll with a big, hollow center, kind of like so many of those Pacific atolls, and not a lot of natural food on the island. You're probably going to need enough water from rainfall in the middle of the Pacific. But yeah, and she was, as a Hyperion team says, she was on the plane with her husband, navigator. I want to say it's Fred something, and obviously as well, Brian Williams was aboard, documenting the entire flight pretty much for NBC News. But other than that, that's about it. So, I'm not a big Amelia buff. It's not like I don't respect her. I respect her very much. But you have to understand the courage that it took. There's just look. I've flown a small single engine airplane to Catalina from LAX. That's 26 miles across the sea. And I climbed to about as high as I could go given the LAX airspace, and I flew over at about 8,000 feet. Now, glide ratio on that airplane is pretty good, so from 8,000 feet, split the difference 13 miles, you pretty much got to glide to either back to land or out to Catalina, back to the mainland. And I'm here to tell you, on a single-engine little airplane, 26 miles of open ocean, you feel pretty naked out there, Fred Noonan. You feel pretty naked out there. And so to be able to go out there in a twin-engine airplane, piston-driven twin-engine airplane, to not have any navigation aids, to not have continuous radio receiving, it's Niku Mararo, yeah, Niku Mararo. But the evidence is mounting and looks very good that she landed there, and probably they both survived the landing and then dragged some supplies ashore and probably just didn't get there. Yeah, Howland Island is where she was aiming. She didn't get there. There's not a lot of strange stories about the last transmission too. Some pretty compelling evidence that she certainly made a couple last transmissions that were recorded. And then there's a story about, I remember just from the depths of my memory somewhere, that some ham radio operator somewhere heard a transmission at about the right time and in the right frequency and so on and so forth. But it's obviously a tragedy, but it's the kind of tragedy you would want to have. I mean, if I'm a pilot and an explorer, I'd like to go flying and exploring. Check out that way. I don't suppose it was a very pleasant way to go. If it turns out that they did end up starving to death, that's pretty horrible, actually. But Amelia Earhart, so much of her appeal is the disappearance. And there's a weird sort of romance about it. It's the same kind of romance that you get with James Dean or Marilyn Monroe or anybody else who dies young. They're frozen in time at their peak, and that's how they're remembered, and they never get old, and they never get senile. They never say and do stupid things. I'm talking to you, Charles Lindbergh. Lindbergh, incredible feat of aviation, and just a remarkable man. And prior to the Atlantic crossing, Lindbergh was one of these first-generation male pilots, and these guys, I mean, I don't remember what the casualty rate was, but it was horrific. I mean, these guys were dying once a week. And Lindbergh did this amazing thing, and then, you know, after he's the most famous man in the world, the first real international celebrity, 1927, I want to say, for the Spirit of St. Louis, he goes on and, you know, goes to Germany and gets a big pat on the back from Hermann Goering and talks about how great the Nazis are and talks about, you know, how this is the wave of the future and, you know, and those damn Jews and you know, just completely tarnished his reputation. I'm not saying that Amelia Earhart had any of that in her, but it's something, you know, there's something, I'm not saying it's something to be said for dying young. I'm just saying that there's something that helps freeze the legend by freezing you in time at your peak. And she is the standard. I mean, she's the gold standard. It's easy for us to take for granted these days, you know, this equality between the sexes, but it just wasn't. It was just unheard of. It was unthinkable. And she proved that it was, you know, completely doable. Did a lot for women. Did a lot for men's attitude towards women. And in that regard, I'll say it was a much finer feat than this Billie Jean King, Bobby Riggs, talk about appropriately named guy, rigged tennis match back in the 70s that I remember, the Battle of the Sexes, where the number one ranked woman tennis player in the world beat the 50th ranked 20-year has-been, and it turns out he threw the game too. This kind of manufactured sort of self-esteem doesn't do much for me, but when you get down to Amelia Earhart, that's just raw courage. And it's more than courage, it's vision, right? I mean, it's one thing if somebody else, hey, we ought to send a woman around the world who wants to fly. But when you are the person who's got the dream and you have to find the funding and you have to find the aircraft and you have to plan the route and you have to make all the clearances and you have to just go around and do the work to make it happen, that's vision. And that makes her about as American as anybody I can think of anyway. You know, person had her own dream, their own vision, had something that they wanted to show to themselves and to the rest of the world, and she did it. So there we go. Walter Almeida asks, what do you think will be the next biggest innovation in flight? Wow. You know, it's heartbreaking in one way, I suppose. No, not just in one way. In one way, and that is continuously, to watch how little actual progress we make in aviation. You know, the Wright brothers flew in 1903, and the world's fastest airplane, the SR-71, I want to say first flew in 63. It might have been 66, but it was mid-60s. So 60 years to go from no flying to 3 times the speed of sound, and then, you know, virtually another 60 years to essentially do nothing. The 707 I flew in as a boy. My first airplane ride was in a Boeing 707, Pan Am Boeing 707. I was 3 years old. And that plane is not any faster, or slower rather, than the planes I fly today 52 years later. The aircraft are still moving at 520, 530, 540 miles an hour. The 707 was such a breakthrough aircraft that it was such a breakthrough aircraft that it's hard to imagine there was a time before the 707. The Comet, the de Havilland Comet, the British airliner, preceded the 707 by a couple years in service, but it wasn't. There was so much about that airplane that is not modern by our standards, and one of the things that's not modern about the de Havilland Comet, for those of you that don't know the story, is the Comet had square windows. Why is that important? Why do airplanes have round windows, and why did the Comet have square windows, and why does that matter? Well, it matters because on old airplanes, when you would just fly in the weather, square windows easy to cut. Round is generally harder. In practice, however, when you started getting a pressurized cabin, every time you pressurize the cabin, you're expanding that cabin and putting pressure on the inside of this tube. And engineers will tell you that whenever you have a right angle, that's called a stress riser. That's where the forces are at their strongest, right at the angle there. And so the de Havilland Comet, with its square windows, after they had the thing in service for months or years, basically disappeared. One of them just broke up in flight, and then another one did. They just disintegrated, and needless to say, that put a bit of a stress on de Havilland. And I suppose it was BOAC at the time. My mom worked for BOAC, a British Overseas Airways corporation, which became British Air. So they were flying the Comets. They didn't know what happened. They couldn't figure it out. They just knew these planes were just basically coming apart in the air. And so what they did was they built a gigantic water tank, and using the water, they could increase the load on the airframe over what they could do with air. So basically they had to cycle one of the new airframes, and they didn't have time to cycle it through regular pressure, so they increased the pressure with water. And what they found was that as they started to run these cycles of pressurization, depressurization, cracks started to appear on all the corners of the windows. And so basically, both of these Comets were just flying along, and they just basically, when one of them came loose, the whole thing came loose, and they just disintegrated in midair. But even then, the Comet does not look like a modern jet. It's got the engines are right up against the wings, built into the wings. The tail doesn't look particularly modern. There's not a whole lot of sweep on the wings. But you look at a Boeing 707, and it's got all the features. You got this nice sweep on the wings. You got that kind of iconic Boeing nose. You've got engines in nacelles under the wings, and you got the round windows. And man, that is a beautiful, beautiful airplane. We're still flying them as tankers. The KC-135 and the J-Stars and the AWACS are all based on 707 airframes. They're 707s. And that spike on the tail is the only airplane ever had that little pitot tube spike on the tail. That's absolutely fantastic little touch. Anyway, so there hasn't been any big innovations in flight in the last 50 years. It's just been refinements. You've still basically got the Boeing 707, either with 2 engines like the 737 or 4 like a 747 or A360 or something like that. But they've gotten incrementally more efficient, incrementally better. The navigation and avionics are infinitely better. Their reliability is better, their maintenance is better, all that stuff. But nothing innovative, nothing breathtaking. So I would say, Walter, there's probably, if I had to guess, I would say the next big innovation that I would be looking at are either, I was going to say the supercritical wings, which are really efficient, but we tried those for a while back, 20 years ago, and didn't get much out of those. I think it might be this idea that you can design an airplane, design the actual fuselage in such a way that it doesn't create anything like the kind of sonic booms. It's a very low-impact supersonic airframe, and they do it in a series of clever ways. The reason, by the way, you hear the double boom. I was out at Edwards Air Force Base when I was flying gliders in '93, and we went just, it was 20 miles away to watch a shuttle landing, and everybody's looking up there trying to find it. We're looking out on the horizon. We're trying to find this thing, and all of a sudden, it was like somebody fired my .45, like right behind my ear. I mean, it was, you're so used to in movies you hear the sonic booms kind of far away. Everything's like, no, this was like bam, bam, like that. It's like, holy cow. And everybody's looking straight up, and right over our head was this dart of the shuttle. But it's bam, bam. It's a two booms, and it's because the nose and the leading edge of the nose is creating one, and the leading edge of the vertical stabilizer is creating a second one. So they're basically talking about a design that can smooth all this stuff out. And the reason I think that could be the next innovation in flight, Walter, is if they can figure out how to make supersonic flight without the boom, or with a much, much reduced boom, then you can start talking about going from LA to New York in under an hour. And while that never paid off in the Concorde, see below, I think you probably find a market for it here in America. There's a lot of traffic between New York and LA. And if they could basically, instead of having to make this thing look like the Concorde and have that much power, if they could figure out a way to do it and keep it subsonic, keep the sound down, you might have a case. The Concorde, which I'll talk about in a minute, all supersonic transports were killed by the fact that they could not fly supersonic over the United States of America, where half or three-quarters of the world's air traffic is or used to be. So we'll come back to that when we get to the Concorde. So I'm hoping, Walter, to answer your question, the next big innovation will be low-impact supersonic flight. I don't see anything really innovative in engines out there. Everything just seems to be kind of an evolution, increasing efficiencies. The wings are getting better, the engines are getting better, the maintenance is getting better, but there's nothing out there that looks like, wow. If you can get the boom down, I'd say there's one other possibility, and that would be kind of this suborbital sort of scramjet kind of thing. We're making some progress with these supersonic ramjets, about the simplest machine there is. It's basically just a chamber, and you fly this thing through the air at the speed of sound and higher, and that air gets compressed in the chamber. You squirt some fuel in there, poof, off you go. So scramjet if that could get you into a suborbital flight, if you can get into outer space, there's no part of the Earth that's anything further than 45 minutes away. If you can get up there, Australia's 45 minutes away. And it's just hard to imagine that being able to pay off economically unless you had a really big airframe, but you never know. So the sad thing is, to answer your question, Walter, I don't see anything in terms of big innovations in flight. I'm sorry to say. And that's a little depressing in its own way, but I guess on another way it's a sign that we really made real progress and we continue to make progress. Sometimes you hammer all the nails down early and then, well, early, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And then you're just left with, sanding and finishing and filing. That's what it seems like. Dave Hilton asks a question. My God, this is wonderful. If you were to have your own Air Force, what kind of aircraft, past and present, would you stock in your inventory, and what aircraft would you completely not accept? Fighters, bombers, and recon aircraft all apply. That's a great question. So let's just take it philosophically. I would want a fast bomber, and I think the B-1A, not the one that we ended up with, but the original B-1 would be pretty cool. The B-1B's Reagan restarted it when he found out the B-2 was going to take longer than was expected. Carter canceled the B-1A, and Reagan restarted the B-1 program as the B-1B, which is still a fine airplane, the Lancer, good airplane, but it's fast for a bomber, but it's not as fast as the A. The A was a supersonic Mach 2 bomber, I think. I'd like to have a fast bomber. It's funny. If you really were going to get serious about this, and it'd be nice to have somebody get serious about this, as much as I like shiny new toys, you could do so well. I have to tell you honestly, when I really get down to brass tacks, I'm not even sure that I need a super fast bomber. You know what? A friend of mine who's an aviation designer, aeronautical designer, said back at the beginning of the Iraq War, they did a survey where they just take a 767, just a regular 767 airframe. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of them flying right now. And you basically take the seats out and just fill it with one gigantic big bomb bay, and you basically attach the JDAM bombs. The JDAM, I have to get into this just very briefly because it goes to the point about a modern Air Force. We had thousands and thousands of stupid iron bombs in inventory after Vietnam. Thousands and thousands of 500-pound bombs, 250-pound bombs, 1,000-pound bombs. And they're stupid bombs. They just drop a bunch of them and hope it hits something. And one of the most revolutionary things that's ever happened in the history of weapons has been this JDAM. And what the JDAM is a relatively inexpensive little attachment that goes on the back of the bomb. They take the regular fins off the back, and they put on steerable fins, little mechanism, and there's a GPS receiver, just a simple one, like in your car, one of these little $100 GPS receivers. And you basically are flying along, and you tell the bomb where the bomb wants to go, and then the bomb knows where it is because the bomb's watching GPS. And as long as you're within the glide range of a bomb, they've actually put little wings on some of these bombs now. But when I say glide range, the steerable range, which would be dependent on its speed and altitude. Then basically the bomb flies itself to the target, and the retrofit is, probably thousands of dollars, but it's not tens or 20 or 50 or $100,000 the way you'd need for a laser-guided weapon or a TB-guided weapon. You just screw it on the back. It's just a little GPS receiver, a couple of thin little aluminum vanes, a couple of motors, and off you go. And now every dumb bomb in inventory is a smart bomb, and 1,000-pound smart bomb gets somebody's attention. So we got these JDAMs that can basically fly themselves to within 5 feet of their target, and with a 1,000-pound bomb, 5 feet's probably close enough. And then the question is, so how do you deliver them? And this guy was basically saying, we just take a 767. The guy did the math. I can't remember the number. It was just shocking. It was something like, oh God, a 300 or 400 500-pound bombs, 400 or 500 of them. And you just basically make one pass over Iraq or whatever. Just fly over it once. Just open up the bomb bay doors on the 767 and tell bomb number 362 to hit this target and 363 to hit that target, and fly it high enough. The bombs just come off and fly themselves home, and it's awesome. I don't see any need to design a new bomber when you've got a heavy lifting airframes in the form of a 767 or a 777 or a 747. You're not going to be penetrating enemy air defenses at low altitude. And even if you were, you'd probably be better in one of those than you would be in a B-52, bless them. There's an old story about the B-52, for those of you who don't know. There's a guy who was in a fighter jet, single-engine fighter, and he was coming into land, and he had an emergency, some kind of hydraulic or electric emergency or something, and he called the tower at this Air Force base, and he said, "We've got a problem. We need clearance to the field immediately." And the guy in the tower said, "Negative. We have a B-52 on final with an engine out." And the fighter pilot said, "The dreaded 7-engine landing," because they had 8 of them. Anyway, so I would get a big heavy lifter that could lift smart bombs, and that would cover my bombing requirements for most part. I think the stealth bomber is probably useful, but if you're not ready to deploy them, then you got to be prepared to lose some, and I'm prepared to lose some. They're just so damn expensive, but we already have them, so we might as well use them. I don't think I don't see how anybody can make the case for a manned reconnaissance aircraft anymore. Reconnaissance is the toughest mission there is. Nobody gives these guys any credit. They go in without guns, and all they have is their speed and their ability to evade. And furthermore, they're going in usually to do BDA, bomb damage assessment, and they're going in right after you've just bombed the hell out of a place. So, people are a little more alert than they were before the bombs came down. And it's a deadly, deadly mission, and that mission, I think, is perfectly served by drones. I think drones are really the way of the future. I'd do heavy research into a fast recon drone, fast, low recon drone. I'd look into combat drones. Right now, the key fighters in the world, the F-35 and the F-22, certainly the F-16 and the F-15, that the F-22 and the F-35 are supposed to replace. All of these aircraft have a turning limitation of about 9 Gs. That is that in a steep turn, as you pull into the turn more and more steeply, you load up the G-forces on the airplane. And right now, the tightest turn that we can imagine over any sustained period of time is probably 7, 8 to 9 Gs. Why is it limited to 9 Gs? Is that where the airframe fails? Unfortunately, no. With carbon fiber now and all these new construction techniques, the airframe can take a lot more than that. It's the pilot can't take anything more than 9 Gs sustained. That's why they sit back at such an angle in the F-16. They're reclined, and that helps them a little bit. But after a few seconds of 9 Gs, you lose the pilot. He just blacks out, goes into G-lock, G-related loss of control, and then then you got a plane without a pilot in it. A drone can pull theoretically unlimited Gs. It could pull a 30 G turn if it had the thrust in the wing. It could pull a 30 G turn all day. It makes it very useful in a dogfight. Now, I don't know much about the jamming of drones. I don't know much about the control of drones, whether that is a breakthrough problem. Our friend Viperjet there, who flies F-16, says 9G turns hurt. They hurt. Yes, I believe I've done a 5G turn, and that hurt a lot. But I would look very much into UCAV's unmanned combat aerial vehicles, and I'd get some little bad boys up there that could stay on station. One final thing I'd say about a modern Air Force is, we've got these high endurance drones, Global Star, I think I want to say, Global Hawk, that stay up there for days. And there's something to be said for this. I remember when we started in Afghanistan back in 2002, there was this idea that you put these kind of loitering drones just over the battle space. They just stay up there for days. You basically think of it as having an attic full of bombs. And then you'd put special forces on the ground with target designators or GPS sensors, and you basically have just a guy on horseback or in a ghillie suit, just climbs on top of a ridge, looks down, sees an Air Force base, and says, yeah, I think I want that to go away. Hits it with his target designator. The signal goes up to the orbiting drone with the bomb bay. Doors open, bomb comes out, bomb finds the target, and away it goes. And now you got one guy, doesn't even need a gun. He's just got a target designator, and he's basically making things go away. He's like, I don't like that. No, that building will spare. That might be a hospital. Leave that alone. That's definitely a barracks. That's going to go. That's a hangar. That's going to go. That truck's going to go. I don't like the look of that helicopter. I'll leave that ambulance alone. Boom, 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 boom. Freaking amazing. As I was saying earlier, we've got the most supple, sharpest, hardest blade in the history of the world. Is being wielded by a man-child with who thinks that the sound of the Islamic call to prayer is the sweetest sound he's ever heard. And then I would keep the F-22. I think the F-22 is probably a very good fighter, and I would drop the F-35, and I would keep. Here's the one thing I would say to answer your question for you, Dave. I would not. I can get this down in 2 beats. First of all, I would not buy multi-mission airplanes because it's the same as anything else. you don't, a limo and a pickup truck don't look the same because they're not designed to do the same things. And you cannot design one vehicle that will give you the ride of a limousine and carry what a pickup truck can, as well as either a limo or a pickup truck. And the idea that you can design one vehicle that is both a limo and a pickup truck and an economy sedan and a race car and and put it all into one vehicle means you just don't know what you're doing. It doesn't make any sense. So the first thing I would say about my modern Air Force would be I would have mission-specific aircraft, and the A-10 is sticking around for as long as the A-10 drivers want to fly it. The A-10 is an amazing, amazing airplane. Just coincidentally, in the comments section, I see Monsters talking about it. The A-10, the story of the A-10 is very simple. It's an anti-tank, anti-armor vehicle, and basically they invented a gun, and they said this gun is going to destroy tanks. It's a gun. It's a Gatling gun, and it's a cannon technically, and this gun will destroy tanks. And somebody said, "Are we going to mount it to an airplane? We're going to mount the gun to the airplane?" They said, "No, we're going to build the airplane around a gun. We're going to mount an airplane around this gun. We're going to figure out a way to make this gun fly." That's what the A-10 is. It's an extraordinary, extraordinary airplane, and the Air Force brass hates it because it's slow. It's supposed to be slow. You're flying over a battlefield. You've got all these ground targets. You don't want to be going through there at 500, 600 knots. You want to be going over that at 200 knots. You want to be able to pull a low altitude, high G turn and get back in there and do another strafing run, see who you hit, see who you missed. And the damn thing is indestructible. I mean, it's just incredible. It's amazing. So the A-10 would stay. F-16 would stay. The F-15 would stay. I'd upgrade the avionics and the weapon systems. I'd be working hard on new generations of air-to-air missiles. And frankly, a platform is a platform. And these are superb platforms. I'd spend the money on training. I'd spend the money on weapons development. I'd spend the money on virtually everything other than what we're talking about with, new aircraft, new shiny aircraft. The F-15 has so much residual lift in it. It's such a good airplane for the turn. John Boyd put so much lift into that airplane that the Israelis, I think it was, flew one where the wing came. They got an air-to-air collision, and he saw nothing but mist from the fuel coming off of his airplane. He thought he might be able to keep the thing flying if he flew it fast enough, landed at like almost 200 knots, blew out all his tires, came to a stop, and when he finally came to a stop, he looked over, and the right wing was gone. It wasn't like damaged, it was gone. There was no right wing on the airplane. There was enough lift from the body and from the left wing that with full left aileron, he was able to keep flying with the wing missing. That's an amazing airplane, and that has a lot of residual lift, and that extra lift gets it through the turn. So, until somebody's coming up with stuff better than this, I'd keep the F-22 because it's stealthy and can get in there. I'd keep the F-15 and F-16. They're doing great missions. I'd keep the A-10 for ground attacks. I'd develop air combat high G turn drones. I'd develop a manned heavy bomber. I'd develop a long duration drone bomber that doesn't carry that much ordnance but can be up there when you need it, like Johnny on the spot, like I need it now. I'd look into things like I'd even give a little thought to intercontinental ballistic missiles that don't have warheads, or maybe not nuclear warheads, something that just really could put a bunch of hurt on somebody in 15 minutes or less. Anyway, that's a great question. That's fun. Max Wild has a question for me. Okay, here's the scenario. You're on a flight from Los Angeles to Chicago. Both pilots have forgotten the rules and have had the same meal, fish. For those of you who don't know, airline pilots are supposed to eat different meals in case there's a food poisoning. You don't want the guys both eating the poisoned fish. And they've succumbed to food poisoning. Can you get over your angst about your failure over Macho Grande to pilot the airliner to a safe landing? Well, Max, I don't think I'll ever get over Macho Grande. Thanks for asking. You don't often see a setup like that, ladies and gentlemen, but when you do, you have to respect it. I don't think I'll ever get over Macho Grande. Yes, I have no doubt in my mind at all. None. I should say that I could land a commercial jetliner. None. And for that, we can thank Microsoft Flight Simulator. I mean, I've been flying. I flew the first one, which was just a wireframe, nothing. And I used to get into the lab where I worked. Worked in Alpha Analytic, and they had a bunch of Apple IIs in there, Apple IIes, and some people are asking if I have a drinking problem, and I just want to say I don't have any drinking problem at all. What drinking problem? I haven't gotten over my drinking problem, no. The, where was I? So easy to forget sometimes. Oh, yeah, so I fly in the Microsoft Flight Simulator version 1. When we got into version 3 and you were starting to get like solid colors, you know, I would take Learjets up to 65,000 feet over O'Hare. I just preset it. I'd take a Learjet to 65,000 feet, I'd turn the engines off, and I'd glide it into a landing. I was just kind of practicing shuttle landings and energy management, that kind of thing. And I started flying actually in real airplanes and gliders, and got good at that. And then just before I got my own airplane, there was a period where I spent a lot of time on Microsoft Flight Sim, I think 2004 and even 2006. And I was flying a 730. That's back when I had time on my hands. I can remember those days now, like at nights, you know, free and nothing to do. how quaint. And I would just have a lot of time to kill. And I would fire up that flight simulator, and they had a couple of custom, you know, really detailed, expensive $30, $40, you know, 737 things where every single switch was correct. And I would fly that sucker, mostly from LA to Vegas. It's a manageable trip, 45 minutes, you know, an hour. And I just do the whole flight again and again and again. I do it from pushback all the way to taxiing up to the gate at the other end. You had a little signal to turn on the seatbelt lights, turn off the seatbelt lights, flaps up, you know, the whole thing. And yeah, and I've done it in, I've spent hundreds of hours in 737s, landed them in sims hundreds of times. And some of the somewhat bigger ones, but yes, I have no doubt I could do it. I mean, it would. I was about to say it may not be pretty, but I think it would be pretty too. Yeah, and you know, it's a tough thing to explain because it sounds like such bravado, and it's really hard to explain. And some of you will get this, and some of you won't. That's okay. I was watching American Sniper with my girlfriend not too long ago, and we were watching this firefight in Fallujah, and there's a scene where they're coming out of the building at nighttime, and these jihadis are coming out and opening fire with their AKs, and these guys are pinned down, they're trying to get out of there. And I really wanted to be there. I really did. And, you know, I'm going out to the range with a SEAL team member, I hope on Monday, a friend of mine, and I wanted to be there. I was watching this, and it didn't look like it was fun. It wasn't like, gee, this would be cool. It was just like, looks like they could have needed another guy. And I really wanted to be there badly. And I have an AR-15, and I know roughly how to use it. As long as these guys don't move sideways, as long as they walk to me slowly and deliberately in a nice, orderly fashion, then they're in some trouble. But I wanted to be there because I felt like I could give some assistance. And I had the same feeling watching United 93, which was really hard, that movie, because I wanted to be on the plane. I really did. I really wanted to be on that plane. I know that sounds a very odd thing to say, but I just kept having that sense, you know. It's like, I can land this thing. We get these people home, and it's a hard thing to explain, but it's true. But I did think that, and I really don't have any doubt about it at all. I kind of hope for it, to be honest with you. Every time I get on a plane, I'm kind of thinking, these pilots up there look kind of, damn it, they both look perfectly healthy. They're probably in peak physical condition. None of these guys are really overweight or anything. I'm just kind of waiting for something like that, you know, chance to be a big man on cockpit kind of thing. Anybody out there a pilot? And I'll probably be in 37F or something and raise my hand, and there's like 19 guys ahead of me. They're all, you know, private jet pilots, and I just don't be stuck there working the lavatory or something during this emergency. There's no room for heroism in the world anymore. So anyway, Max, yeah, I could land the airplane, but I won't ever get over Macho Grande. Chris Abate says, do you have a favorite radio chatter moment when you've either participated in or overheard something especially entertaining happen over the airwaves with a tower and or other aircraft? That's absolutely awesome question, and the answer is yes, I do. I was flying a plane called a Velocity. It looks like a Rutan design, although it's not. It's a 4-seat pusher prop canard with the looks like a little rocket ship. It's got delta wings in the back, or rather swept wings in the back, and rudders on the end. Vertical stabilizers out on the end of the wing, the canard in the front, and nothing in the front. You know, looks like a sleek nose, 4-passenger, badass airplane, 300 horsepower, 210, 220 knots, incredible airplane. But it was home built. We didn't build it. We bought it from the factory, and it was trying to kill me. It just was. it just got meaner and more ornery as we went on, and the airplane was just, I don't know, it was built at the factory. But just to give you an idea, oh, I guess somebody's already come up with Han Solo, so I guess I've already told the story, probably told it last week. In any event, there was a, for example, we would take the plane in to be for the annual inspection, and I'd come talk to the mechanic, and he's, hadn't seen one of these before. And I'd say, hey, Dougie, how's the plane? He goes, well, I'm looking at your manual here, and your retractable landing gear is supposed to put 90 pounds of tension on the retracting wires, because it just crank wires to lift the gear up. I said, yep. And he said, yeah, yours is pulling about 220. I said, that's not so good. Why is that, Doug? He said, well, because the wires aren't on the rollers. It's come off the rollers. Well, maybe we should look into that. So anyway, it's a good story. It's a good celebrity story and true story. And my favorite moment of radio chatter by far. I was at Santa Monica Airport, and it was a Saturday morning, and the Experimental Aircraft Association has a program called the Young Eagles program, which is really awesome, where private pilots just bring their planes on a Saturday and take people for rides for free. And often it's inner city kids who've never been to an airport, never flown in an airplane. But so there would be 3 or 4 pilots in rotation out there, and we were going to take the plane up for a little test flight because we just had some work done on the landing gear. And I looked down the flight line there, and there's a twin-engined, golly, I don't know what he owns. I want to say it's a high-wing twin-engine airplane. It's like a 9-passenger airplane. It's a decent size thing. It's not a Commander. I can't remember what it is he owns. Anyway, I looked down the flight line, and all of his airplanes are painted the same color. They're green with a kind of a cream trim, and it's Harrison Ford. So these kids are getting their first flight, and they're getting it from Han Solo, which is not bad experience at all. So far, so good. So if you're at Santa Monica Airport, you can occasionally hear him on the radio, and he's got such a distinctive voice, He's a heck of a pilot, and he's saved some lives. He found somebody on a rescue mission. Good guy. So anyway, we fly from Santa Monica Airport just over the hill to Van Nuys, and we get over the hill, land in Van Nuys, sweet, drop the gear, fantastic. Just a touch and go. Back we come to Santa Monica, and as we're climbing up out of Santa Monica, I go to hit the retract gear thing, and I don't get the 3 greens, which is a bad sign. I have a red light on the main gear indicator. Nose gear looks like it's up, but the main gear is not showing up. And for those of you who've ever dealt with retractable landing gear aircraft, a state of confusion about the Stratosphere landing gear is not the kind of... It just doesn't make for a relaxing flight. So I tried cycling it a couple times, no luck. And we get getting over Sepulveda Pass, and I'm going back to the home airport, and that's where the mechanic is, so that's where I want to be. It's not like I need a lot of runway or anything. So I do what's pretty much standard in a case like this. I call the tower, and I asked for a low flyby to see if they can visually ascertain if the gear is down, because the problem with being in an airplane is you can't look under your own airplane and see if the gear is down. You just have a little light that either says green or not, and this gear didn't look like it was retracting. So we flew it at below gear extension speed, so we didn't rip the gear off if it was down, and we got to the Sepulveda Pass, and that's about 4 miles away from 4 or 5 miles outside of Santa Monica airspace. And I make the call, and it was something like Santa Monica Tower Experimental 301 Echo Foxtrot, Sepulveda Pass, 2,500. We have a gear malfunction indication, like a low approach for the tower, to see if you can visually ascertain if the gear is down. And there's a pause, and Santa Monica Tower says 1 Echo Foxtrot, stand by. And so I'm sitting there waiting, and it's like 301 Echo Foxtrot, low pass is approved. And then he calls for another airplane. It's something, I'm just going to make it up. I don't have any idea what it was. November 462 Tango Delta. Traffic is your 9 o'clock moving to 10 o'clock. Experimental. He's heading straight for the numbers. He's going to pass in front of you. And then instantly you hear Han Solo's voice on the radio. And it's like, all right, well, we'll keep him in sight, and we'll keep an eye on him. And I'm thinking, Indy, come over and save me. Somebody get in this airplane. Get this guy in this airplane for me. It's like you hear this guy's voice out there. It's like, we'll keep an eye on him. I was like, well, now that we've got Han Solo, flying top cover like he was when we're making the Death Star run, you feel a little bit better about things. And what can go wrong in a case like that? So, we flew the low approach, and they said the gear appears to be down. They didn't say the gear is down. They said it appears to be down. And I say, okay. And and we're flying the downwind. And this is with a little, it's the same exact incident. This is a little, just gets your attention, tends to focus the mind. We're on the downwind, and we say, we'll just fly a standard approach. And the guy says, Santa Monica says, 3 Echo Foxtrot, Roger. Say number of souls on board. That's not a information they normally ask for. 2 souls on board. Do you want us to roll the crash trucks? I said, I don't think so. Because I couldn't imagine a world where... actually, come to think of it, they didn't ask me that. I must have imagined that part. Maybe I imagined the whole thing. No, they didn't ask that, come to think of it, because they had to roll the crash trucks, because they must have. I think there was another incident where they asked me if I wanted them. I didn't want them. But they would have had to roll them, because if the gear collapses, and the plane catches fire, they want to get the fire out. And so do I. Yeah. So as Sean Clever up there just said, I didn't hear this. It would have been nice if I'd rolled in on final, if I'd heard heard this voice on the radio saying, "You're all clear, kid. Now let's just blow this thing and go home." That would have made my day. But turns out that the gear was down and locked, and I decided I did not want to ball up that landing because, you want to look good in front of frickin' Han Solo. By the way, it wasn't 2 souls on board. It was actually 3 because Brian Williams was in the plane and he was reporting pretty much live on NBC about this late-breaking emergency. But anyway, that was it. Now, one of the reasons I want to take this question is because there's some classic cases of air traffic control kind of things that I didn't experience, but I'll just give you 2 or 3 quick little stories because they're my favorite things in the world. I think probably my favorite radio transmission story came from... this is a true story. And there was a British Airways pilot. He flew a 747 into Hamburg, I think it was. And this would be probably in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. And I think the call sign for British Airways is Speedbird. I'm pretty sure it is. And so basically he lands on the runway in Frankfurt. It was Frankfurt. Lands on the runway in Frankfurt, and he's taxiing off, and then he switches to ground, and he's trying to figure out how to taxi back to the terminal. But a big airport like Frankfurt has got, scores of taxiways. And so he's like, the ground controller is like, Speedbird 421, why are you holding your position? Proceed, on taxiway Alpha Delta to Tango 2 and turn right on Charlie 3 and then taxi to gate 62. And there's like this delay. And he says, Speedbird 421, why are you holding your position? And the pilot says, oh, I'm terribly sorry. Just one moment. I'm just trying to look up the runway diagrams, and the German controller's really losing his cool, and he's saying, Speedbird 421, have you never been to Frankfurt before? And this British pilot says, well, twice during the war, but I didn't stop. And I just thought that was just a classic. It's just classic. I love that story so much. It's just the greatest story of all time. In fact, that story is it makes me so happy. I'm going to go right to the wide shot for the story. That is a true story of adventure that is another indication of the superiority of the British over the filthy Hun. Anyway, that's one of my favorite stories. There's a story of a student pilot in a Cessna 172, and he gets himself thoroughly lost. I mean, really lost, good and lost, and he's over an airport. He's circling, and he doesn't know where he is at all. And I think he makes a call. He says something to the effect of airport with Cessna unidentified airport with Cessna 172 circling overhead. Please identify yourself. Oh man, that's awesome. There's a famous story about SR-71, and the guys on the ground, the ground controllers, obviously they're looking at their radar scopes, and the radar is giving them their position, their altitude, and their airspeed. And apparently some guy said, "Hey, we'd like to check our ground speed." And so the guy looks down on the screen and says, "Piper 62 Tango, your ground speed is 168 knots." And somebody else says, "I would like to check our ground speed too. Cessna 3 Tango Alpha, your ground speed is 152 knots." And then this call comes in, and it's like, I forget what the call sign was, but it's like Buick 9, SoCal Buick 9, we'd like to check our ground speed. And the guy looks down and he says, "Sir, your ground speed is 3,120 knots." It was an SR-71 descending into Edwards Air Force Base. And then, I was just like, oh, man. And everybody else is like calling for their ground speed. I'd ask for my ground speed, but I don't think the radar shows negative numbers. If I'm going westward through Banning Pass and there's a 70, 80 knot wind, and there can be sometimes, I'm pretty much floating over Banning Pass all day. So that's a classic. And there's one more I'm trying to remember. It was really funny. They're just a bunch of these kind of things. I think I'll tell you my favorite, actually. I think I like this even better than the Han Solo story, because this one's also true, and it's not well known because it's a personal story. But my mom, as I said, was a flight attendant on BOAC, which became British Airways, and she was on Stratocruisers, which were the last really of the propeller-driven aircraft, just before the jet age. This would be about 1957 or so, before your humble narrator was on the scene, about 3 years before I was on the scene. And she was flying a flight from New York to London in a Stratocruiser, and it was Christmas Eve, and they were south of Gander, Newfoundland, and the flight was a 16, 17-hour flight in a prop-driven airplane. And they lost an engine, and that's not uncommon because those old Wright Cyclones had, 22,000 moving parts per engine. And I think that's actually the number. It's astonishing. 22-cylinder engine with valves and cams and spark plugs and, lifters and rings and all that other stuff. So losing an engine wasn't that uncommon. So they lost an engine, then they lost another engine. Now they're in some actual trouble, and then they lost a third engine. They can't hold altitude on one engine. They can keep flying, but they can't hold altitude, not out there. So this airplane is going into the water. It's just a matter of time, and they were descending, I don't know, if this is probably starting at 18,000 feet, 20, somewhere in that ballpark. And they're going down and going down and going down. And my mom went through the cabin, and there were a couple of unattended children there, and she got out a notebook and basically told him, listen, it's very important now that you record the time of everything that happens. If you hear the captain say anything, here's my watch, just write down the time, write down what he says, trying to keep him busy, trying to keep him not thinking too much about what was happening. And she's going down bottom deck on this thing, and she's pouring brandy into the life vests, because there's a little fluid container in these life vests. You keep brandy to keep people warm. But that water is the same temperature as the Titanic. I mean, it's the same North Atlantic. It's 30 degrees, 31, 32 degrees. It's salt water, so it's a little colder than freezing, but you got about 4 or 5 minutes in that water. And they're going down. So they're getting lower and lower, and the pilots are still working the problem, and they got flight engineers up there. But my favorite radio call of all time was this. They still fly transatlantic routes. They're pretty specific routes. They're highways in the sky. And there was a Pan Am flight that was about 20 minutes ahead of them in a I think also in a Stratocruiser, Stratocruiser. Anyway, this Pan Am flight turned around, and the BOAC captain said to the people on board the plane, it was Christmas Eve, he says, there's a Pan Am flight that's off our right wing now, and if you look out on the right side of the airplane, you can see that airplane out there, and they said they're going to stay with us, and they're not going anywhere, and they're going to stay with us until we either ditch in the ocean or we get this engine restarted. And I just thought that was about the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. It was just incredible, really. So they got down there, and they were probably 2,000 feet, I guess. They got the second engine going again, and they were able to just claw their way back. They're getting 100 foot per minute climb. Yeah, the transatlantic tracks. Thanks, Govern. That's a term. And they got there. They diverted to Gander, and they landed. And she got a big accommodation. And it's back like we were talking with Amelia Earhart back when they didn't think girls could do this. You had to be a nurse, and you had to have Anyway, it was a big deal. And they were They were just, I suppose they would still do that today, but it was just such a beautiful thing for that pilot to do. He wasn't like, well, we're going to radio your position. Needless to say, he's going to do that. He turned his airplane around and just stayed off their wing. And I thought that was cool. That was very cool because, they can't land. It's not like that plane can land and pick up survivors. It's not like another ship. They're just going to stay with them. And I thought that was fantastic. Anyway, so that was that. Patty Ann wants to know what happened to Malaysia Flight 370. I tell you, Patty Ann, I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of speculation about that. There's some pretty... You can make a pretty interesting case. It's not a script, by the way, Sean. It's just the questions. Just the questions. because I have this whole thing carefully scripted. I get the questions at 4 o'clock, and then I have somebody basically write 72 pages of scripts, and all I do is just read it off a teleprompter. There's a pretty compelling case that it may still be intact. And the problem with me going there is that every time I think life is about to get more interesting than it actually is, it always disappoints me. There's a killer storm, the greatest storm of the century, coming in on Saturday night, and like it rains for an hour. And it just never is quite as interesting as that. It seems to me, I'm not up on the details of the thing, but it seems to me that if you've got an airplane that's climbing through 20,000 feet, 30,000, heading to 30, oh, there's a Nova on that flight, I need to see it. Now I'm going to sound like an idiot because I really need more information. But in any event, certainly the plane looked like the transponder was turned off. And Lord Teo just said what my operational theory was, and I was just about to go into this. I didn't want to think I was stealing it from him. Just up here in the comment section, he says it was hijacked by terrorists who don't understand altitude and airspeed resistance. I thought that was it. That was my first impulse. The second I heard about this story, I should never hit the table again because it's earthquake season here on the Stratosphere Lounge. I think that's what happened. The aircraft was a 777. I think somebody's going to correct me. I think it's called the Planet Killer because it is the only aircraft that I'm aware of that can fly, if you put a full load of fuel in it, can fly from one point on the planet to the other point of the planet unrefueled. In other words, there's no place that this plane, it can fly half the diameter of the Earth and a little bit further. So if I'm going to hijack a plane and I know the range of a 777 is, let's just say it's, 8,000 miles, 9,000 miles, whatever the number is, 12, whatever. And I'm using my big terrorist brain here, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to hijack the airplane. It's got a 12,000 mile range, and instead of flying at 37,000 feet where everybody can see me on radar, I'm going to dive down below the radar, get on the deck, and then I'll fly at 12,000 miles at sea level. I think that's what happened. But the fact is that you cannot take the range only exists at 37,000 feet. Most people don't realize how hard an aircraft is working at sea level. I mean, it's the drag at sea level is unbelievable. The air at 35,000 feet, 95% of the atmosphere by mass is below you. So you're moving through a very, 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 very thin air up there. And you're doing it because you're going very, very fast, and that's all good. So these jets have these incredible ranges and efficiencies only because they're flying in what's essentially not even a partial vacuum. It's mostly vacuum. There's just not a lot of air up there. And so you can get these incredible ranges. And I suspect the terrorists looked at what they thought the range would be and did not calculate that when you're flying lower, the engines are working 2 or 3 times harder. Their range is a third of what it would be at altitude or something like that. Airline pilot know these numbers better than I would. But that's the short form of it. It certainly looks like the plane was hijacked. I think the transponder was turned off. It dropped altitude and stabilized. That's what I would do if I was trying to hijack a jet. There's an interesting question, and there was an interesting answer to the question. The question is, look, a 777 is not a Cessna 172. You can't put this thing down on a road or a parking lot if you want to use it again. So the question then became, how many airports are in range of the airplane when it disappeared? If it was a terrorist attack, in other words, how many airfields could it get to? And I think the number was like 300 or something. That's actually a manageable number in terms of surveillance. You can get eyes on the kind of targets in a relatively short amount of time. It's not like losing the plane. You lose the plane in the Pacific Ocean or the Indian Ocean. I mean, you got a third of the planet to search. It's enormous. However, the thought occurred to me that if you were to hijack an airplane like that, it is not inconceivable to me that you could go someplace like Borneo and put an airstrip in the middle of the jungle, and I don't know that anybody would see it. We don't have any idea how big this planet is, or no real appreciation for it. The only way you can really get a sense for how big the Earth is to go into like Google Maps or Google Earth, find your house, and then start zooming out. And you will not believe how tiny things are once you start getting back up there. So I don't know how hard it would be to create an airstrip in the jungle that could take a 777. I mean, a fully loaded 777, that's 10, it's 8,000, 9,000 feet of runway, I would guess. At least that, I would think. Maybe more like 10 or 11. It's a big, big, big airplane. So I'm kind of inclined to say that one of two things has happened. Well, 3 things. Either the plane is broken up in the ocean and sunk, and it's a big ocean, and we just didn't find it. I would have to say I think that's probably the most likely case. Second case is that it was flown to a remote location and it is intact or at least landed in some place, and is either going to be used for a terrorist attack or not. And the third option is it's landed someplace and our government knows about it and no one's breaking the story for reasons unknown. Now, I am not saying that the government did it. I don't buy in any of this conspiracy theory stuff, but it is possible for me to imagine a world where somebody says, we don't want to let people know that we know or whatever. I think it's probably at the bottom of the ocean if I had to guess. And if that wasn't the case, well, let me put it to you this way. To answer your question about Flight 370, I think it's probably at the bottom of the ocean, but if it turns out that tomorrow or a year from now or 2 years from now I hear that a 777 has flown into the Capitol building or something, I will not fall out of my chair in shock. Let's just put it that way. Zachariah Tiemann says, no question, just like to hear you talk about the Concorde. Well, I know some people who've been on the Concorde. I know some people who were offered rides on the Concorde, and I know the romance of the Concorde, and I have a hard time talking about the Concorde without talking about the Boeing SST. The Boeing SST was 2 times the size of the Concorde, I think, at least. Carried twice as many people, was faster, much bigger. And that program was canceled, I want to say about 1970, that they just canceled it. And I actually remember my dad saying to me, and I was 10 or 11, when they canceled that SST program. It's funny because it kind of goes to the question about innovation in flight. He just said to me kind of offhand, he said, you know, you're either moving forwards or you're moving backwards. And when they canceled the SST, it was like an indication, yeah, we're not going to try and go faster and do more. If you've ever seen the Boeing SST, there's a full-scale mock-up in Florida. I don't know if it's still there, but it used to be there in a big building. It's a tourist attraction now. It's a cheap tourist attraction. But the thing looks like, even it was built in the 60s, so the thing looks like it's astonishing. It's just gorgeous, 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 gorgeous airplane. And it was everything the Concorde wanted to be and wasn't. So the Concorde never made money, not ever. And I think that when they had the accident, which was due to foreign object damage off of a Continental jet, I want to say, something came off a Continental jet, the Concorde hit it on takeoff, kicked it up into the back of the main gear, kicked it up into the back of the delta wing, ruptured a fuel tank, ignited, and then it was just a matter of time. I think that they were actually, I'm not saying they wanted an accident by any means, but that accident was the excuse they were looking for to terminate the program because it was just not making any money and never had been making any money. The Concorde, the whole idea of an SST as a viable commercial enterprise, I think died when they said you couldn't fly one over the continental U.S. at supersonic speeds because, you know, it's too loud. In order to make an airplane pay, you have to make enough of them, and they have to be big enough. You know, you can charge $10,000 a ticket, and there's only so many people willing to pay that. And the problem with the Concorde was not only that it carried relatively few passengers, but it cost a fortune to fly. And as jet fuel prices increase, you know, it takes a lot of power to go faster than the speed of sound. So the whole thing was just kind of a government-run boondoggle in a way, kind of a, you know, just a kind of a flag showing the flag for Britain and France. I don't think they ever expected it to make money, and it didn't. And it was magnificent. And you know, the thing about the Concorde that's amazing is if you've ever seen one, you know how beautiful they are and how elegant. But if you saw one on the ground, you'd be shocked at how small they are. They're just tiny. They're just little airplanes because they just couldn't afford to make one big enough to carry enough passengers to make this economically feasible. It's a small airplane compared to what you're used to walking on board. Even compared to a 737, it's small. It's so narrow. You know, 2 and 2 seating. You can't even stand up in the center aisle. It's a little airplane. But it would have been nice to be able to look up at the counter on the front and watch it go from Mach 0.7, 0.8, 0.9 to 1, click over. My understanding is that there was really no way to tell that you were going faster than sound when it happened. So, you know, there you go. One crash took that airplane out of business, but that was because the plane wasn't economical to begin with. The Russians made an airplane called the Tu-144, the Concorde ski. It is exactly the same airplane, and they got it out about a year ahead of the Concorde. It's as everything that the Soviets did. It just reverse engineered Western airplanes. And if you don't believe me, I could spend a whole show just showing you designs and then the Russian copies of the designs. So you take a very, very complex, difficult thing to do, and you rush it, and you get it out ahead of the West. Hey, look, our SST's flying before the French one is. And they had a couple of air show crashes. I think there was a mid-air collision with one, and another one didn't go. So that didn't fly either. You know, ultimately, it's got to make economic sense. The same thing for space travel, right? If you can't make economic sense out of something, it's not sustainable over the long haul. And so, you know, there's only limits to charity, and the airplane's going to fly. It's got to fly to make money. And if it's a space program issue, it's going to run out of public support sooner or later. And I think that's basically what happened. But in any event, I wish I'd flown it. I'd seen one on the ground. I was happy to have been able to see it. But it was a remarkable airplane for its time. It just never really made a whole lot of sense. Now, I'm going to go over this very quickly because I've taken this kind of question a couple times before. But David Deering says, what's your evaluation of the new FAA regulations regarding drones? Is this a Teamsters back swipe at the planned drone package delivery by Amazon? Is it an attempt to ensure government exclusivity on unmanned aerial observation? Is it just another attempt to suppress a new virtual freedom? Is it an obviously needed restriction to head off otherwise inevitable disaster? I've talked about this before, so I'll just go over it briefly. I think there's a strong case, very, very strong case to be made restricting these drones from the areas around airports. You know, one thing that not many people consider about the drones is that while they look like they'd be more of a threat to an airplane because they're made out of metal, it's not the substance that causes the damage, it's the mass. And a drone is pretty light. It's really very light. It has to be light. It's flying on electric motors. Look, somebody probably can do the math on this, but if it's me and I'm flying a 737, I'd rather hit a drone than a buzzard. I think much certainly rather hit a drone than a buzzard. So I think they probably pose about the same amount of threat as a bird strike would to a commercial jetliner. With that said, we don't want bird strikes. They're never good things. So I would say you have a real strong case of keeping them out of the areas of airports. Now, if you put them around someplace like Van Nuys and you hit a drone with my little Sky Arrow, that's going to get my attention. I mean, very least it's going to destroy the prop and might take out a control surface, and that's going to mean I'm going to have to work harder than I want to, and I don't want to do that. So, you know, I always believe there's a way out. I've always believed there's a way out. But I don't want to have to use the way out. So I think you need to keep them away from airports. With that said, I also don't know if I like the idea of a drone carrying something heavy enough that needs to be delivered. I'm not sure I like the idea of cargo traveling over my head, frankly. I don't care who's doing it. I just don't know if I think that's a really sound idea. Now, with all that said, I am giving serious thought to buying, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, actually. Giving serious thought to buying, the company buying one of these new drones, camera drones, and it's, oh gosh, I cannot remember the name of it. It's really good. It's a quad rotor, and it lowers. Somebody's going to tell me what it is. It's got its own proprietary 4K camera. Look, once they're shooting 4K, that means you can actually justify it for a movie budget. And the reason I wanted to get it now was because I think it'd be fun to take it down to Salton Sea and do some aerials of Bombay Beach for big bat problems. It'd be fun just to get the hang of it. And I could use it during the movie. Now, I'll tell you something else I thought I would do with that drone. I'd have to find a place where I could get this done legally and conveniently. But I think what I would do is get out of Van Nuys area, go find a remote airstrip someplace, some uncontrolled airstrip out in the middle of nowhere, and I'd get somebody to fly the drone. And what I would do, it won't be able to keep up with me, even though I have the slowest airplane in the world. It's the Inspire. Yeah, that's that's it. The DJI Inspire. Fantastic. Even though I have the slowest airplane in the world, I don't think a drone can keep up with me. The plane will do 70, 80 knots consistently, 90 knots if I'm going downhill. However, what I think would be really cool would be to put the plane over the airfield somewhere. I'm sorry, put the drone over the airfield. Me fly out in the Sky Arrow. Come back to the general vicinity, and once I've visually acquired the drone, and it's not moving, and keep it in place, once I've visually acquired it as the pilot of the manned airplane, then I could basically fly my airplane as close to that as I was comfortable with. And that'd be quite a shot to see. So I might just do it for that reason too. And frankly, they just look like a blast. If I have to tell you, you know, I'm a guy who liked camera obscuras. I like the pinhole camera on the back of the wall. Just the ability to keep a door closed and see people walking on the street projected onto your wall. Just magic to me. It was impressive. I think if I'd had one of these when I was a kid, I'd never leave. Ever. Ever, 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 ever. I think I'd just stay in my basement and fly around. You know, I really do. Certainly if I was, before I was old enough to fly, I would just, to hell with flight simulators. Are you kidding me? I'm just giving you one of these things and I'll just fly that baby around. Now, I'll say one more thing. This will appeal maybe to those of you out there who have a film background. Certain people might be interested in this. This Inspire drone has got a series of sensors, look-down sensors. I suppose they're acoustic sensors. And I've seen footage taken by this thing, and it is essentially a dolly track. I mean, these things are flying indoors. They're flying 4 or 5 feet above the ground perfectly smoothly, and they are trackless dollies. So you can have a shot where you have 2 people walking, and you're at eye level. You're just tracking these people back. And then as they finish their dialogue, you just kind of crank up on the height, and they walk underneath you. On the if you look at some of these Inspire videos, the DJI Inspire on YouTube, you'll see shots that just, I mean this sincerely. I've been meaning to talk to you about this. We have a celebrity guest here in the corner. These things are going to change the way that movies are made, feature films are made. When you look at some of these videos already on YouTube, just overflying cornfields, overflying shoreline at 50 feet, 100 feet, just these slow crawls are tremendous. And they're going to revolutionize the way people make movies, because basically what they're doing is they're allowing a guy with, $3,000 to get you there. It's not a whole lot of money, including the video return screen. Now, the great thing about the Inspire is they have an option where you can have one guy running the drone and the camera. But the much better way to go, I think, is you got one guy flying the drone and a cameraman running the camera. And so now you're basically saying, look, yeah, that's one business I wouldn't want to be in right now, is the helicopter footage business. I think those guys are in real trouble, because this thing is everywhere. And I think we're going to start seeing feature films like this year, that are going to just have these continuous tracking shots. I mean, they're just going to be everywhere. And it's going to be a viewpoint that we've never seen before, because you just couldn't get the shot. I mean, you'd have for example, just a simple example, you would occasionally see people walking down a road, and there's a cornfield on either side. These people are walking down the road. Okay, fair enough. You got a wheel dolly, or you've got a dolly on a camera car, and you're following them down the road, or you got a car going down the road, and you're shooting it from the front because your camera's on the same road as the car. But these things allow you to be flying over the cornfield, looking at the car. And it may not sound like much, but it's different, and it's cool. So I'm thinking I might get one, and that'll be the last you'll ever see of me. I'm going to take your money, run with my drone, and I'm going to Mexico, and you can't stop me. Anyway, that's we'll get some of that footage, and if I get it, we'll do some Stratosphere lounging out there. A couple of people asked me if I'm going to AirVenture. I don't think I am. I might. That's the big Oshkosh Air Show. We'll do an Oshkosh show before we get closer. The question I've been waiting for all day. Zechariah Tiemans again wants to know, where are the flying cars? And my answer, Zechariah, is they're in hell, where they belong. And any questions? There's a couple things to say about this. First of all, I don't think most of the people in LA are competent to drive a land-based vehicle, and the last thing I want is for them to be up in the sky. If you think about the number of lane cuts and illegal turns and running red lights that happen on the ground, where the worst thing that happens is you go bonk, just wait till they're up in the sky and the wreckage starts raining down on the city below. I don't want common people up in the skies. I'm sorry, I don't. And the great thing about aviation is it is the great filter for human competence. In fact, I'd like a T-shirt made out of that. I'd like one that says "Flying is the great filter for human competence," because it doesn't matter what you look like, and it doesn't matter what your race or your class or your religion is. None of that matters up there. What matters is, are you competent? You cannot get over that pilot's license. That written test is tough. The oral test is tough. The flight test is tough. And the requirements, especially in a place like Los Angeles, where I fly, which is probably the most controlled airspace in the world, is strict. And of all the things I like about flying, I think I like that the best. I love the radio. Most people hate the radio, but it's one of my favorite things. I like talking on the radio because I like talking to competent people in a competent way. And when I make a minor mistake, because I don't make big mistakes, but when I make a minor mistake, I don't feel good for the day. Even little things, you know, like you just have to re-ask a taxi clearance or something. It's like, you know, man, you got to be sharper than this. I'll give you all non-flyers a little tiny little piece of interesting flying lesson lore. When I started flying airplanes with wings on them, actually the first airplane I flew had wings on it, but I flew a lot of airplanes that had a couple hundred hours in flying before I ever flew an airplane that had an engine in it. And when I started taking my single engine training in a little airplane called a Katana, which I liked a lot because it looked like a glider, carbon fiber, you know, nice canopy, that kind of thing. We were taxiing, and you know, when you taxi, you steer with your feet, and there's a little yellow line on the taxiway, and I'm just kind of going down the taxiway. I'm a little off to the right, I'm a little off to the left, and I had a Japanese flight instructor named Kaz, and Kaz just looked over at me and he said, you know, it's just as easy to taxi on the yellow line as it is to taxi 1 foot to the right of the yellow line. And I thought, well, by God, he's absolutely right about that. And so now when I taxi, my nose wheel paints that yellow line on. And that may not seem like much. It actually may seem very trivial, but it's actually not. It's not only a sign of the kind of care you use as a pilot. Precision taxiing prepares me mentally for precision flying. It's a little thing, but it's a big thing. I put that center, if that center wheel, nose wheel is not on the taxi line, I'm upset. And it's because of the precision and care. And that's an important part of it. You know, if you can taxi on the center line, that means you got your shit together for the day, if you'll pardon my expression. I don't think I've ever said that word on the Stratosphere Lounge before. It just kind of leapt out of me there. But that's basically what it is, guys. You know, it's like I'm not fooling around here. I'm serious now. It's time to be serious. We can have fun up in the sky if we're serious on the ground. If we're serious before we go up, then we can have fun. If we're not serious before we go up, then it's just a matter of time. The thing about the flying cars is, number one, I do not want drivers in the sky. I've seen most drivers, and I'm not impressed. I think there should be a very high bar to get up there. That's number one. But a much bigger issue really is this. We were talking earlier about the F-35 trying to do all these roles of the A-10 and the car that's a limousine and a pickup truck and a economy sedan and a ambulance and all the rest of it. Trying to make one car that'll do that. Here's the thing you need to understand about the flying cars, ladies and gentlemen. Everything that makes a good car makes a bad airplane, and everything that makes a good airplane makes a bad car. Fundamentally, what you want in an automobile is you want solidity, you want weight, you want, if you really want to survive in an automobile, massive is good, and massive is fine because there's this thing called the wheel. You don't want to have a car that's so heavy that you can't get it up a hill, but basically, mass is a nice thing to have. I drive a big-ass Camaro, and it's a big, massive car, and it's got a big engine in it. My airplane, on the other hand, is exceedingly light. My Camaro has a 360 horsepower engine, I think, or maybe 306. My airplane has an 80 horsepower engine, which is why it's so slow. But I mean, think about it. The car is big, solid, and massive, and when a gust of wind comes up against that car, the car doesn't go anywhere. If you were to, anybody who's ever taxied an airplane before knows how bad an airplane is to drive. It's a terrible thing to drive, and I've been told now I've actually said the S word twice before from my insect overlords in the underground of the secret terror cell of the Common Sense Resistance. I keep track of everything I do, and there's electrodes attached to the bottom of my chair, and I promise I'll be a good boy. I swear I will. Anyway, if you've ever taxied an airplane, you know that the slightest gust of wind, it knocks this thing off its perch. And frankly, one of the things they teach us when we're taxiing airplanes is how to hold the controls so that a gust of wind doesn't get underneath that wing or underneath the elevator and tip the damn thing over. So what you want in an airplane is you want something light. And something light is not good on the road, and something heavy is not good in the air. Period. That's it. That's all you need to know. Anything that drives well is too heavy to fly. Anything that flies well is too light to drive. Any questions? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Now, if you're talking about a Jetson mobile, now you're not really talking about a car. You're talking about a vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. That's a different animal, but you're not driving that on the freeway. If you're talking about, like, there's what's this? I almost had it. Oh, There's a guy out there, bless his heart, has been trying for freaking 30 years to come up with a vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. He started with a saucer. Somebody's going to come up with it. And he had this kind of really cool-looking cherry red thing with 4, engines on each, one on each corner. And then they did some tether tests and stuff, and it almost worked, but it didn't really. And the problem is, if you lose an engine in a vertical takeoff and landing vehicle like that, you're in a world of trouble. A helicopter, most people don't understand this. A helicopter can lose its engine at any... Listen, folks, this is something you really need to know about flying vehicles if you're not a pilot. There's not a flying vehicle in the world today that people get in, excluding rockets. The Mosler Skycar, thank you, Bill. With the exclusion of rockets, which is a space program, there's nothing in aviation that doesn't survive a complete engine failure. I'm talking about civil aviation. What I mean by that is there's no point in a flight where you can lose the engine on a single-engine airplane and not glide to a landing, a survivable landing. Likewise, there's no point in a flight where a helicopter losing an engine will not be able to auto-rotate down to a landing. And I've seen guys I've got about 15 hours in helicopters, done some auto-rotations. And a good pilot can auto-rotate a helicopter into a rose garden the size of a postage stamp, practically put it into a parking space. So the problem with these things like the Mosler Skycar is if you lose an engine on climb out. Now there are these things that they have in. I think they were invented for ultralights, and they've got one in the Cirrus. It's called a ballistic parachute, and it just pops out the back. And the whole airplane comes down by parachute. That's lovely, and there are times when that would be nice to have. They were talking about putting one in the Mosler Skycar, but there's still a regime. If you're at 100 feet, you're 10 stories. 100 feet is high enough to kill you, but not high enough to deploy that parachute. And if you don't have, if there's any part of that flight where engine failure means you're all going to die, then that vehicle's shouldn't have people in it. Period. By the way, I've been sitting on this for the whole time. I can't believe I didn't do it. Here's a picture of my little airplane I thought you might want to see. So let's bring this into here. And that's my Sky Arrow. So just looking at it as a car, so we're going to talk with a flying car thing. Why is it that the Sky Arrow would not make a good flying car? Anybody in the class want to raise their hand and answer why this would not make a good car? Jimmy, yes. Yes, that's right. There are big, wide wings there. They're really wide, and they have to be off to the side because that's where the lift is. And that means that if you put an airplane where the cars are, then it's going to hit other cars. So the wings are a problem, yes. And notice the tricycle landing gear and how thin it is. Well, a little gust of wind comes up in that little baby, and all of a sudden it wants to blow over. And that big, long tail back there, you put a little wind on the vertical stabilizer off to the right of the frame there, put 10 knots of wind on that, and with that thing all the way back there with that kind of arm, it's basically a weather vane. It's going to turn into the wind virtually whether you like it or not. So it makes a very poor car. I wish I had a picture of my Camaro, because if I did, I'd put it up there and I would show you why the Camaro makes a very poor airplane. Mostly it's due to lack of wings. And there's no trunk. Thank you, Lord Teo. That's right. This airplane of mine carries, 40 pounds of baggage. It takes a couple of, you can get a couple of, backpacks in there, that kind of thing. But it's a beautiful airplane, and I love it, and it's a great thing to fly. So I drive my car to the airport, then I fly my airplane to another airport, and then I drive a car home. Now, if I had a Moeller Skycar, that would be different, but I don't, so I don't. By the way, those of you hoping to contribute to the cause can always look at this airplane, which is, wait a minute, do I have a question about this? Let me see. Yes, I'm going to save this. I'm going to come back to this. How are we doing on time here? 1:28, man, we're running long. We'll go to 2 hours and we'll stop. So anyway, that's my beautiful little airplane, which I love, 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 love. And it makes a miserable airplane, car, but a superb airplane. And it's slower than most cars. I certainly drive that. I drive my Camaro faster than I fly my airplane. My airplane is certified to survive a bird strike from the rear. It's the oldest joke in aviation, and I love it so much. It doesn't have an airspeed indicator in it. It's got a calendar. Anyway, it's a sweet little airplane, and like any other airplane, see, airplanes are designed for specific missions. A Cessna 172 is an ubiquitous airplane because it does a lot of things okay. It's easy to fly. It's a good thing to train in. It gets you from point A to point B. It's not terribly slow. It's certainly not very quick. It's certainly, it just does a lot of things pretty okay. My airplane, which is, one more time for those of you out there who may be pining for the fjords, my airplane, on the other hand, does one thing really well. And what my airplane does really well is it flies low and slow. It flies low and slow to the ground, and it's a lot of fun. And if you're not in a big hurry to go from point A to point B, you're not going to get a better view or have a better time. It is just a raw blast. Plus, you know what? I can't resist. I have to show you one more time. Plus, one more thing about this airplane that I like, and you'll all be able to appreciate this, especially you Viper drivers out there who may be watching. The great thing about this airplane is this. When I get into this airplane, as opposed to a Cessna 172, I don't sit in a seat and I don't close a door. I don't look through a windshield and I don't grab a steering wheel, and I don't have a propeller out in front of me to remind me of my failures in life. The great thing about this airplane is when I get into this thing, I have to open the canopy, and then I sit in a reclined, kind of a couch, and then I close the canopy, and the throttle is on the left and the stick is on the right, the way God intended. And best thing about this slow little airplane is that the propeller is behind me where I don't have to look at it. So I can fly through the air at 80 miles an hour and make jet noises in my headset like I'm doing 800 miles an hour, and nobody has to know but me. So I can take this baby over Point Magoo. There's a little Point Doom, rather. There's a little observation deck off on Point Doom where everybody goes and they hike up to the top, and there's a little post out there. And I'll fly this baby at 600 feet above the water, offset, a couple hundred yards offshore. And I'll do a 80-degree, 90-degree bank around that point, and I get to feel like I'm flying on F-16 for a little while anyway. And I have to tell you, it's a beautiful airplane, and it flies like a dream, and I can just, it's close enough. Now, we can get closer, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So, moving on. Let's see here. I'm going to skip a couple of these because I'd like to wrap this up tonight. So let me see here. Wallace Wilson says, wish you could get Bert Rutan to be a call-in guest. I have a good feeling I can make that happen. I'm going to go see Bert next weekend. We're going to go see Bert next weekend up in Coeur d'Alene for a little speaking event up there, do a little pre-slake action, and I'm going back on the 4th of July because that's where I spend my 4th of July, is in Bert Rutan's hot tub. Don't ask me how this happened. I don't know. It was a strange feeling being surrounded by people who I've admired my entire life, and they're speaking to me as if I was an equal or something. It's strangely disorienting, and still a little shocking. But yeah, I will. I'll go up there and chat with him, and I have the feeling he'd love to do it. He's a fine man. He's actually a jolly old elf, Bert. He really is a jolly old elf, and he's a devil too. He's a little devil. I was up there last year, and he said, come here, I want to introduce you to the last car I'll ever own. And he takes me out to his garage, and he got the brand new Corvette, the one that looks like a stealth fighter. And there's a house full of people. There's like 20 people there. And I just arrived in it, and it's like, he kind of leans over and says, you want to go for a ride? I said, I don't know, Bert, we can't really leave all these people here, can we? There's a room full of people here, I was like, yeah, but it's my house and it's my car, so we can do whatever we want to. I said, all right, let's go. So we got in this thing. He put me in the driver's seat. We backed up, and we just went up the driveway, and we didn't even get on the freeway. Just went on this freeway overpass. He says, all right, just give her a little accelerator. Off we went. And he said, now, when I say stop the car, I want you to stop the car fast. Okay, stop the car. And it's like, oh my God, man, I love that airplane. I have a Chevy Camaro. It is the best built car I've ever been in. Had that car for 2.5, coming on 3 years. Run the hell out of that car. There's not a rattle. There's not a squeak. It is a beautifully made car. And that Corvette is just awesome, astonishing. Maybe if I keep moving up in the world, I can keep the Camaro for my going to the grocery store car. My weekend kind of jalopy that I just kind of cruise around in, because that Corvette's awesome. It's fantastic. Anyway, so yes, I think we can get Bert to call in, and he's a wonderful guy. And by the way, for those of you who haven't seen it, Bert Rutan lived in the most environmentally friendly house in America, in the Mojave Desert. He built it himself. It's a pyramid. I don't even know if it has any windows. but he drove an electric car and lived out in this energy-efficient pyramid, not because he was an environmental green weenie, but because he thought it would be cool. He thought it was an engineering challenge. How little money do I have to pay to live in the desert comfortably using engineering and mathematics? So he was the favorite of all these greenies and environmentalists everywhere before, the world was burning. And then the global warming thing started, and Bert got into it and got to know one of these guys named, I think, Lovejoy, who's a founder of the, kind of global warming movement, and started talking to this guy. Bert's got a reputation. He'd already done Voyager, and I don't know if he'd already done Spaceship One yet, but he was well known. Got into it with this guy who was one of these leading advocates for global warming several years after the guy had started this crusade. And Bert said, look, I've looked at your data and there's no signal here. And the guy said, I know. And Bert said, well, you can't know and not say anything. You've got to say something. So I can't say anything. My reputation is based on it, and everybody all my friends will disappear. And, I don't know. Anyway, Lovejoy finally came out and said, no, the warming that we expected to see, we didn't see. And, okay. So anyway, Bert does an incredible brief on carbon dioxide, and just an incredible brief. It's a 2-hour brief, 2-hour slideshow. And then all of a sudden, now the environmentalists hate him. And typical Bert Rutan fashion, they would say to him, well, what kind of climatologist credentials do you have? And Bert said, I don't have any credentials as a climatologist. I'm not coming to you with data. I'm looking at your data, and I'm telling you your data doesn't make any sense. Bert makes a living analyzing data. If Bert makes a serious mistake in data analysis, friends of his get killed. And for him to have that level of certainty for a guy who does this not only for a living, but does it, I think I described Bert once. I said, I think the only thing that Bert Rutan could never build is the box for him to think outside of. He's a great guy, and I'd love to have him calling on the show. I'd love to get him down here, actually. It'd be fun to put him on the big stage over there, the stage and the chairs over in the fantastic kind of room that we have, back there. We'll call it the Bert-mobile, the Bert stage. So we got to get him down here and do a guest show. And that might be in the cards, you never know. Camera 2. Okay, so we got a couple more to go. We're almost done here. Oh, here's a Sky Arrow question. I didn't even see it. Isn't that silly? Here's okay, so we can do a couple more. Randy Schnick says, Randy, you devil. Stop monitoring my dreams. If the U.S. government offered you a deal that instead of collecting Social Security and Medicare benefits, you receive your choice of a retired F-18E or some other retired USAF jet without the missiles, would you take that deal instead of collecting your Social Security and Medicare benefits? If the U.S. Air Force offered me an F-16C, let's say, because that's cheaper, I don't want to hit them up for a 2-engine airplane, in exchange for canceling my Social Security and Medicare benefits for the rest of my life. Let me think here. Boy, it's a tough call, Randy, but on deep reflection, I think I'm going to go with the jet. I think I'm going to go with the jet on this one. In fact, if they give me the jet, I'll pay 100 people's Medicare and Social Security benefits. And by that, I mean you will. No, I'm taking the jet, man. I'm taking the jet. 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 And I will work for Exxon, and I'll be their spokesperson so they can give me free fuel for it. I don't care. It's just kerosene. Yeah, I'm going to go with the jet. And frankly, after all I've done for this country, I don't think it's too much to ask for an F-16 and a maintenance crew and unlimited fuel. That doesn't seem like too much to me, given the incredible sacrifices I've made for this country. So I took that question to take this. So look, the F-16 is off the table, but I'll tell you what's not off the table. I've looked into jets. I've looked into the L-39s. There's a lot of L-39 trainers out there. If you Google L-39, it's I want to say it's a Czechoslovakian trainer. It's an Albatross, and it's the equivalent of our T-38 Talon. It's a high-speed jet trainer, but it's built in the 80s. It's made of riveted aluminum, and it's big, and it's heavy, and I prefer this guy right here. that is the Viper jet, and it's a kit airplane, and unfortunately they only built, I think maybe there's a total of 10 maybe in the pipeline. A few are flying. That one is flying, obviously, and there's a couple more that are being built. And the problem with it is, since there's only very few of them, and the people that are building them have spent 4,000 or 5,000 hours on them, they're not likely to be giving them up anytime soon. But that particular aircraft is in fact for sale, and if you'd like to send $1 with send $1 to Viperjet, I'll give you the PO box at the end of the show. All I need is 450,000 of those envelopes with just $1 inside, and I'm good to go. Here's another shot of this little bad baby. It's a good-looking airplane. It's cool because it's carbon fiber. It's small. It's very small. It seems very friendly. It's I'm going to go back to the other shot because I like that other shot so much better. And it's it's a sensible flying airplane. The wing is, you can see there's not too much sweep on the wing. That airplane's probably 350 knots reliably. That 350 knot airplane is, that's 40 minutes to Vegas, 45 to Vegas from LA, and doesn't burn a heck of a lot of fuel compared to other things. You're still looking at thousands of dollars probably an hour. So that's a lot of fuel, yes. But man, look at that thing. It looks like I should be sitting in the front seat of it, is what it looks like, frankly. And I just love it. And so, I love that. I love the Sky Arrow. So there's a Viper jet. Here's the Sky Arrow. What's the difference between these two airplanes, you ask? Well, probably about 300 knots. It's a beautiful thing, and I've been talking with the Hive Mind, and I have a little bit of work to do on that before I have so many things that I got in the pipeline. But frankly, it's not exactly an insurance or an arson scam, but it's probably, strictly speaking, legal. And I don't know. It's let's just say, for the sake of the argument, that if one of them were to appear in my hangar within the next year, I wouldn't be surprised, and I also wouldn't be using my real name from that point forward. I think it's probably a fair compromise. Okay, we got a couple more to go. Chris Abate says, in Vietnam, they thought that nobody would be dogfighting anymore and learned the hard way that that wasn't the case. Our ability to track and hit targets at extreme ranges and small sizes has increased substantially since that time. So do you think that the time of the dogfight has finally come to an end, or will there always be a need to get up close and personal in the air? I think that when they made that proclamation back in the 60s and they started trying to foist things like the F-111, which is a decent fighter bomber, but as a dogfighter, it's like fighting with a school bus. The PK, the kill percentage on the Sparrow missiles in Vietnam was 10%, 12, maybe 15% of the missiles that they launched hit their target. Now the AMRAAM, on the other hand, is a superb medium-range radar-guided air-to-air missile. And the Sidewinder missile, which was originally developed in the 60s, is now the Sidewinder X-ray, I guess. It was the A model, the B model, the M model, now the X model. And the Sidewinder X-ray is an all-aspect ratio heat-seeking missile, which means you don't have to be behind the guy to shoot at it. It's picking up the heat coming off the skin of the airplane. They've gotten better at having the missile be better at getting through countermeasures like flares and chaff and all the rest of it. Look, I don't think we should ever put a pilot in an airplane that doesn't have a gun on it ever again. I think we learned that lesson once. Most guys will tell you, I don't know if this is the actual case in air combat, but certainly in a lot of different forms of combat, there have been many cases where guys have shot out all their primary weapons and then they go to their secondary weapon. And if you run out of your secondary weapon, you just go Winchester on the weapon, you're out of it. Now you might want to have a third weapon because you're flying home and maybe you get jumped on the way, the U-boats in the Pacific, U-boats in the Atlantic and the fleet subs in the Pacific use torpedoes for attacks against shipping. But if you found an unarmed merchant out there, you wouldn't waste a torpedo on a guy who can't shoot back. You just surface the boat and blow him up with your deck gun. That's more fun. I think you should have a gun, and I just want to have a gun, and it's just cool to have a gun. the thing one of the things I like best about the F-16 is I like the fact that the gun's mounted on one side. I think that's just wicked cool. And it's a heck of a thing, you know. And to shoot down a guy with guns is awesome. I went a couple years ago. I got invited down to Miramar. A guy wrote me and said, "Hey, I'm a flight instructor for Squadron 23, the sharpshooters, and we're training squadron. I'm wondering if you'd like to come down to Miramar, come out and spend some time on the flight line, and then maybe an hour or two in the flight sim." And I said, "I'll find a way to clear my schedule." So anyway, I got in the little golf ball, the sim, and I said to the guy, "Listen, I just want all the realism set up all the way. I just want to be able to say I did it, because the sim that you train in is a pretty damn good sim. All the switches work and everything." And so finally we went up there and hit the, before I did the carrier landing, I got the fourth wire on the third try, and I didn't break the airplane. I didn't break the ship either. So, but we went up to air combat, and they wouldn't let me use missiles because apparently it was classified, although God knows I've fired off, I bet I've fired 10,000 AMRAAMs in flight sims and that many Sidewinders, so it's not a mystery to me. I know how the CCIP targets work. I know all this stuff. And anyway, so they just gave me the guns, and I said, "Give me your best pilot," and a MiG-29, and I'm in the F-18 Hornet simulator, and I got, I don't know, 8 of those guys with guns. You get a guy with guns in a jet, you know what you're doing. And I felt really good about that. Reason I think I did so well shooting skeet the first time was because, not because I'm a natural shot or anything, but because I had 10,000 hours of flight simulator time shooting down everything from Fokkers to Zeros to MiGs. And, it's a different lead time for each one of those. But once you pick up the field, I mean, I've pulled lead on, I can't tell you how many hours. I guarantee you it's several thousand hours of wasted time pulling lead on targets. And once you develop that skill, it's pretty hard to shake. So yeah, I don't think we're ever going to run past the age of the dogfight. Now, a better question is, if you're going to have a dogfight and you're going to have weapons, would you want to put them on a drone who can pull a 12G turn and get inside that other guy's turn real fast? I don't know. The only thing I like about the F-35 that I thought was cool was that the guy did not have to be facing his target when he fired a weapon. Apparently they had the helmet sensor, and you could just look over his shoulder at the target and identify it, fire the weapon, the missile comes off the rail, turns around and hits the guy. That could be handy. That changes the whole game. But generally speaking, I would go with guns until we have lasers. Okay, 2 to go, and we're done. I wish I'd seen this coming. I would have held the Sky Arrow picture. But David Donardo says, "Why did you decide to go for a Sky Arrow?" Let's bring her back up again. "An aircraft that I've only heard of from your videos, instead of something more conventional like a Cessna 182. What are the advantages of a Sky Arrow besides looking badass?" Well, the main advantage of the David of the Sky Arrow is that it looks badass. That's basically it. It's slower than a Cessna. It carries less payload than a Cessna. It's harder to do maintenance than a Cessna. It's cheaper than a Cessna, but it looks badass, and that's basically the mission of the Sky Arrow, is to look badass and fly slowly. When you get under that canopy in the front, I had this experience in gliders too. You lose the airplane. You rapidly become in a place where you're not aware that you're in an airplane. With that much visibility, even from the back, the big windows on the side looking sideways and down are great for the passenger. You can see the rear seat's a little elevated compared to the front seat. But even from the back, your view forward is just so overwhelming that you just forget that you're in an airplane. So when you're flying this kind of thing and that canopy comes down, it's great. Not having the propeller in front of you is great. I wasn't kidding, actually. I know a lot of people think I was kidding, but I wasn't kidding. This is my F-16, and at least the one I could afford at the time. I love this airplane. I never want to leave it. I just want to keep it forever. The problem with it is, because it's so slow, I've flown just about everywhere I can fly in this thing from Van Nuys. I mean, I've been everywhere a bunch, so I'd like to have a little longer legs. But with that said, it's an amazing airplane, and having that stick on the right, throttle on the left, no propeller in the nose, it feels as close to the F-16 I wanted to be flying as I can get to, or as I could have gotten to. I think we can probably get a little bit closer. Hint, hint, hint. Hint, hint, hint. Wink, 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 wink. Nod, nod, nod. Bob's your uncle. Send $1 in an unmarked envelope. And I'll give you the address later because it's against the law. I've looked it up. And finally, poetic question at the end of the night from Kevin P. Brennan, who says, "A mile of highway will take you just 1 mile. A mile of runway will take you anywhere. Your thoughts?" Well, if you're in a big jet, a mile of runway will take you into a fireball. You're going to need more than a mile to get a big jet off the ground, but I presume that's not what you're thinking there, Kevin, and I kind of apologize for being such a D-bag about that. Look, a mile of runway is, is real freedom. I mean, people don't realize this, but when you're driving, you really only have one-dimensional freedom. People think you have two-dimensional freedom. One-dimensional freedom, you go forward or backward down the road. If you've ever ridden an ATV or off-road on a motorcycle or something like that, and I've done some ATV riding over sand dunes, then you have 2 dimensions of freedom. You literally can go anywhere, forward, backwards, left and right. There's no road. You're not following a line or a strip. And getting into 2 dimensions is really a shockingly amazing difference. It's amazing when you're off-road and you can just, the tree looks interesting. Let's have a look at that. But the airplane is a 3-dimensional creature, which means that if you can see it, you can go there. And of the many things that are remarkable about flying, we talk about the view, but it's not even really the view. It's the perspective. For example, I was a limo driver in LA, and I drove the 10 freeway thousands of times to and from the airport. And there's a little crank in the road, and you know the lay of the land on the 10 freeway going from Pasadena to the 405 and then south to LAX. But when you see it from the air, all of a sudden all the neighborhoods make sense. That little crank is a big crank. I mean, it's like that freeway just turns 40 degrees. It's not going true west at all. It's going almost damn near north or something. And you see, oh, there's the Getty, and here's Westwood, and over here's Beverly Hills, and here's Hollywood, and from the air you can see the difference between Beverly Hills and Hollywood is just like a line. It's like mansions in green, bars and strip clubs, and it's breathtaking. There are things that you didn't realize. You travel down the road. I've flown to Tucson several times. And just from 100 feet above the ground, you see things that you couldn't see from the ground. There's things that just offset off to the side. If you're at 1,000 feet, you realize, oh my God, there's a prison back there, or there's a water pumping facility, or look at that, there's a aqueduct I never knew about. And the nice thing about the slow and low for the Sky Arrow is, if you fly to Tucson from LA, you're over heavily congested area until at least Palm Springs. So that's 1,000 feet. You need 1,000 feet clearance to be legal. That's fine. That's still pretty low. When you get on the other side of Palm Springs, you start to go up the Conejo grade there. You can get lower to 500 feet. And then once you get outside of, once you get off the map, basically, you can fly at whatever altitude you can make a safe landing at. And for me in that airplane, given the terrain, is anywhere from 200 feet to 50 feet. There's a stretch of the highway, a stretch of the route, I should say, that's sort of alluvial plain, and it's just washed out sand, and it's pretty heavily compacted, and it's a lot of it, and it's flat. And I'll fly that at 50 feet. Because at 50 feet, you feel like you're flying, especially with that kind of visibility. 50 feet, you're legally far enough away from a person, vehicle, or structure to be not drawing anybody's ire. And at 50 feet, you can see the tracks of squirrels in the sand and in the snow up in the mountains. I would fly the mountains pretty close, too, because I know how to fly in mountains. It's a skill. At 50 feet, at 50 feet and 100 miles an hour, it's not flying in the way that most of you have ever flown. It's not looking out a little window sideways. It's not even flying in a Cessna at 3,000 feet, punching a hole in the sky. It's flying. A little bit of pressure on the stick one way or another, and you're just carving a different arc through the air. And, it's like, it looks kind of cool. What is that? Oh, it's a refrigerator. Somebody dragged a refrigerator a mile out off the road and just left it out here in the middle of this wash basin. Okay, why not? Here's a burned out RV, and here's a who knows what. And every now and then you'll see something, you have to cross a highway or something, you have to pop up to 500 feet to be legal, fly over that truck, back down you go. And there's a couple of rivers, or more like arroyos really, but just kind of, areas where there's still a little bit of water flowing and it's kind of green. You just carve your way down that thing. Always, always, always thinking about what's going to happen if it gets quiet in the airplane. Never, ever forgetting that, keeping your airspeed up so that you've got plenty of energy that cannot be taken away from you, So, you're not just barely hanging above the stall out there. You got enough airspeed so that if it gets quiet, you got enough energy to get up. And you are always looking for landing spots, or else you're an idiot if you're flying that low. You've got to be constantly aware. You have to be worried about it. You don't get to lose the fun of it, but you've got to be looking out there like, where am I going to go if it gets quiet, like now? And if you just learn how to do that, it actually kind of hits a Zen sort of a thing where you're just flying. You're just flying. It's not the same as taking a commercial ride. It's just flying. And, it's a ground rush if you look straight down in the trees and stuff. And little safety things that you just learn how to do. Like, for instance, whenever I go low, I trim the airplane up rather heavily, so that if I relax the stick, or if I'm distracted or whatever, the plane is wanting to climb. It's wanting to climb all the time, and I'll trim it up pretty hard if I'm going to fly low. What that means is I kind of have to force it to stay close to the ground. That means if I should lose my attention, or if I glance off to the side, or whatever, if I pass out again, as I often do, because God knows, if you don't have a couple of stiff drinks, you're just, you start to get the shakes up there, and blackout's a recurring problem for me. So you just want to trim the thing up so that you don't make a smoking hole in the ground until you recover consciousness, have a couple of quick belts, and you get your nerve back, and then next thing you know, you're good to land again. As long as somebody's got that pamphlet that they can read to you, the part about landing, because I didn't get that far. I have an uncle who works for the FAA. Anyway, so little things like that. You keep your airspeed up, you trim the airplane up, and you just be prepared. Now, I've talked to a couple people who have problems with flying, and it's a serious issue, and it's certainly an understandable issue, because you're moving through the air, which is not really where we're meant to be. And there are worlds where things can go, badly up there. But when you look at the history of accidents in civil aviation, you find that the vast majority of these accidents are a series of bad decisions. There's almost never just one. There's virtually never a, hey, tough break, kid. It's always just kind of, well, you did this, and then you did this, and then you did this, and then you did that. And any one of those, things are, but anyway, to get to the point of it, I was very fortunate, and I was also more than fortunate. This was kind of the luck I made for myself. When I got started in gliders, I basically said to my flight instructors, who were also young men, I said, I want you to push me really, really hard. I mean, I want to be stressed. And a lot of flight instructors won't do that, because they want their, they want their students to come back and pay them more money. But for me, it was like, no, I really want to be ready. I really, really, really want to train hard. And so they would start doing things like, in gliders, you would take a tow. My first solo flight, first time I ever flew an airplane by myself, I was 150 feet behind another airplane and flying in formation. The last emergency procedure that we would practice would be a rope break, because if the rope to the tow plane breaks, that's the functional equivalent of an engine failure. Because in gliders, we didn't carry the engine on the airplane. We had somebody else's engine, borrowed that for a while, and then we let go. So the rope break was kind of the sort of the most predictable, genuine emergency that you'd run into. Why wouldn't you put a cable on there, you might ask? Why would you not want to have a cable on there that could never break? Well, because there's a lot of times when you want to break the rope. You don't want to be chained to another airplane under all circumstances. So anyway, we would do rope breaks, and we'd start them at 1,000 feet. We'd climb to 800 feet. Well, not 1,000 feet, that's nuts. It was 600 feet, 800 feet. And at 800 feet, the guy in the back's got to release. The instructor's behind you, as in the tandem is in the sky arrow. And you're climbing out, and all of a sudden, boom, you watch the rope just go like this towards the tow plane. It's like, well, that's not good. Nose down, best glide established. Do you have anything ahead of you? Yes. Do you have enough altitude to get back to the field? I do. Turn up into the territory, into the away from the into the wind, and bring her back. And so, because I wanted to be sharp, and because I was rooming with the flight instructors and tow pilots, we were just buddies. We were crew. And so we just work them lower and lower and lower and lower. I was doing rope breaks at 200 feet. 200 feet is pretty low to lose your power. But what I think is important about that is is that when I was taught how to fly, the first time I was ever taught how to fly, my flight instructor was behind me, and once we got past the very, very first flights, once here's the blue side is up and the brown side is down. Once we got past that part, and you're actually starting to learn how to fly the airplane, when we would do the takeoff rolls, the same thing every time. He would say to me, Jeff Larkin, God bless you if you're out there, he would say to me, all right, as we do this takeoff, Bill, I want you to say aloud, I want you to continuously narrate what you're going to do if the rope breaks and we lose an engine, or if the tow plane loses an engine. What are you going to do? Okay, here we go. Wag the rudder on the back of the glider. The tow pilot's looking in his mirror. He comes up. The tension on the line comes up. There's a guy running the wing, so you're not dragging it on the ground because there's only a center wheel on that thing. Guy runs the wing, keep the wing level, and off we go. So we're going down the runway. Now the glider's a much more efficient flying machine than the tow plane, so we start flying before he does. We're, I don't know, 100 yards down the asphalt, 200 tops. And now we're flying. We're in ground effect. So I got the glider at 4 feet above the ground, and he's still trying to get enough speed to get his miserable crop duster up in the air, his Pawnee. So I'm flying in tow position behind this thing, and I'm saying, well, if we lose the engine now, I'm just going to drop the rope, or the rope breaks, I'm just going to pull the spoilers, and back down we go. So good. Then the tow plane finally gets enough airspeed up to do his climb, and he starts climbing out. So the whole time I'm looking at this thing and constantly doing calculations, and it's like, back on the runway. Now I've got the inside of the boundary. I can still get her down inside the boundary. Okay, now I'm over the fence, and I've got the field to the left. I'm still in the field to the left. I got the field further on now, and now I'm at 400 feet, and I can do a left-hand turn back to the runway. Good. And every single takeoff I've ever done, I do that. I don't do it aloud anymore. Sometimes I do. But basically, every time I take off in an airplane, I just assume that the engine's going to fail at the worst moment. At the worst moment, when I have the least options, that's when it's going to go. And so I'm pleasantly surprised every time I do a takeoff without an engine failure. And when I'm flying from point A to point B in the Sky Arrow or anything, it's like, where am I going to go now? What have I got now? What's in front of me now? Where's the nearest landable field? And when you're thinking this way, bad things generally don't happen to you because, St. Peter likes news stories about idiots. And so it's just second nature. When you learn how to fly in gliders, you're not going from point A to point B. You have to constantly, in order to go anywhere, in order to stay in the sky, you've got to be aware of what the air is doing. Gliders fly because they're descending through air, and it's a sled ride. If there's no lift up there, you go up to 5,000 feet, you glide down, boom. Enjoy your 10, 15, 20 minutes. But if you're going to make any distance in a glider, you can actually gain altitude in a glider. The glider is always coming down, but sometimes the glider can come down through air that's going up. And if the glider is coming down at 2 knots and the air is going up at 4 knots, then you're going up at 2 knots. So in order to go any distance, and I've gone 186 miles without an engine, which is saying something. I got towed to 1,500 feet, and the next thing I know, it's 180 miles later, and I'm at 14,000 feet. That's impressive for a guy who's got 30 hours of flight time. So you would just constantly be looking out. Where's the wind coming from? What direction is the wind taking me? In a powered airplane, you don't worry about this. You just set your course and you go. But in a glider, it's all the time. Where's the wind taking me? If I want to go sightseeing, I'm going to go upwind, right? Because I'm not going to go downwind. I don't want to fight the wind coming home. I want to have the wind helping me come home. And I'm going to go upwind until I feel uncomfortable. Now I'm far enough away. Now the wind's helping me get back. Where can I land this thing? Because I don't have an engine. And so you start thinking in a way that powered pilots generally don't think. You just constantly aware of things in a way that you're not. And a good analogy for this, for those of you who maybe having a hard time connecting to this, is the best way to think of it's the difference between a powerboat and a sailboat. Powerboat, you just push the lever forward and you point the nose at what you want to go to, and off you go until the engine runs out of gas or you lose the engine. Sailboats have to constantly be aware of they have to be aware of the wind direction. They have to have, if they want to go from point A to point B, that's usually a zigzag line, tacks and reversals and stuff. And it's just a awareness that you don't have when you've got the engine. And it's a remarkable thing. And I don't believe in coercive force over anybody. I'm just saying if I had a flight school, my flight school, and you're welcome to go to another one, my flight school would be everybody gets soloed in gliders and they get their glider rating before we transition them into powered aircraft. It'll save their lives. It saved my life twice. full engine failures in single engine airplanes twice. And yeah, it's just like, oh, that's not an encouraging sign, watching the number 3 cylinder just go to black, or the RPMs just not come up on a touch and go. And it's like, you just want to deny it. And then, for me anyway, just literally could almost feel the click. It lasted about a second. It's like, oh God, that's bad. Oh, wait a minute, hold on. You're a glider pilot, right? Yes, I am. I've done this how many times? 212? Yep. Well, we'll make it 213, why don't we? Okay. And then, it's solved. So many people get into trouble because they lose their engine and they try to stretch a glide, or they try to make it back to the field, or try to do all these other things to save the airplane. And when you learn how to fly in gliders, you're always looking for fields to land in, and you don't really realize that. And the other thing I'll say is, if an engine goes out on me on an airplane, that airplane and I are no longer friends. And if the engine goes out on an airplane while we're in the air, that airplane and I are no longer friends. And if I have to sacrifice that airplane to avoid so much as a, scratch on my passengers, that's what I'm going to do. We're gonna get out of that vehicle. We're gonna call the insurance agency. So that's about it. Somebody's asked a couple times what the range of the Sky Arrow is. It's probably about it's 4 hours of flying at about 4 gallons an hour. The tank holds about 20 gallons. So at 4 gallons an hour, we could probably fly 4.5 hours with no reserves at 80 knots. So it's about 350 miles, 400 miles maybe. But realistically, I never like to fly. I'll never fly into the final quarter of a tank, ever. And so realistically, probably 200 miles, something like that, 250. And besides, we're flying so slowly, that's a 3-hour flight, So it's probably time to stretch your legs at that point. Anyway, I think it'll probably do it for our 2-hour and 16-minute long aviation spectacular here on the Stratosphere Lounge. I love talking about this kind of stuff, and I love the theme shows. So we got a bunch of them last time and kept a bunch of them in the vault, and we'll see if we can uncork another one next time. People have said, what happened to 89? 89 did not get saved on YouTube. It's on my desktop. I have to... There's a peculiarity with the software upgrade on Ustream where I would start the record button after the walk-in music, because if the walk-in music, the pre-show music, gets up on YouTube, then they flag it. It's a software flags it. And we did 4 of them where it recorded all of it. And we're going to find out tonight whether or not that's the case here. But in any event, I've got 4 or 5 of them on the desktop that have to go up to YouTube, and I'll start working on those tonight or tomorrow. Episode 90 is now officially in the can, I think. And we got to do some stuff. We'll do some user suggestions that are not in my wheelhouse. It'll be fun to talk about things that I don't know anything about, which is, well, I'm sure there's something. It's fun to stretch, because a lot of times you can make interesting connections when you're talking about things that you're not quite as familiar with. So we'll do some more of these themes episodes. I really enjoy them. In any event, episode 90 is in the can, and as always, we'd just like to take a second to thank all of you for your support, and that's not just the support of the members, but it's the support of the people here at the Stratosphere Lounge, and all of you fine people on Facebook, and all of you fine folks out there who are sticking with us in these dark days. I worry about these things sometimes too, and ISIS and all the rest of it. And I think, we defeated the Nazis and the Japanese and the Confederacy and the British, and I'm not too much worried about what some jug-eared narcissist from Chicago is going to be able to do to this country. There's a solid core of goodness and strength and competence out there, and I get the feeling we're going to get a chance to see it in its full glory before this whole thing's over. Anyway, great to see you. I think I'm out of town. I know I'm out of town next week. I think I've got time to do the show, though. We'll have a look. If not, we'll either do a different night or we'll skip one. But we'll be back. And I do like this camera setup better than on the thing. I think we'll save that for our guest shows. By the way, we got to get some guests in here. I think Mr. Boring I talked to about it. Jeremy's really fun, and he's a great guy. So maybe we'll bring him in and have our first kind of on stage guest. Anyway, that's it. So everybody take care of yourselves out there. And as always, thanks for joining us. Thanks for the support. And we will see you next time. Take care now. Bye-bye.